Hey guys. This is part 17 of What If Naruto Was Sealed and Woke Up After 2,000 Years. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 44. For information, please dig here. Location: the Normandy. Alright, what do we have? Naruto asked, standing in front of the conference table. The entire team was there, even Grunt, who was still nursing his wound. It's not so much what we have as it is what we don't have, Miranda told him. Both he and Ruko, who stood off to his right, shared a look before saying together, translation, please. She did not roll her eyes at them, no matter how tempting it was. Jacob, would you mind? She asked him, looking across her left shoulder. Sure, he replied. He leaned on the table a little and looked at the whole team. As it turned out, the information we pulled from the last base didn't have as much information on it as originally thought. Are you serious? Gurus asked him from across the table. You mean we almost died for a piece of useless information? There was a tone of annoyance in his voice that was undercut with anger. I didn't say that. I said it didn't have as much as we thought it would have. There is still something on it we can go after. Great, we're back to chasing a grain of sand across the galaxy, Zaid groused, the annoyance on his face matching his voice. It was irritating enough to begin with. It's bigger than a grain now and more like a vague idea of a person. And how is that any better? He asked, still annoyed. Because now we know that the person who made the inhibitors had been contracted to do so, Miranda said, taking over from Jacob. The information from the base has revealed that the contractor had requested the materials that gave us the hunt because she knew enough about chakra to know that they would be effective in the inhibitors. How would she know that? Quan Misley asked her. That is the question. We've narrowed the answer down to two likely scenarios, and one is more likely than the other. What's the unlikely one? Ruko asked. That they managed to get a human, possibly a chakra scientist, to make the inhibitors. And how's that unlikely? To her, anyone could do anything with the right amount of persuasion, bribery, or outright intimidation. Chakra scientist unlikely since location unknown to all but Alliance, Morden explained. General human unlikely too. If successful, why bother continuing with Naruto Uzumaki? Variations? She suggested. Good thought, but still unlikely. Ruko smirked at the compliment. The Solarian might have shot the thought down, but he still complimented her. She liked that. Anyway, Miranda continued, the far more likely scenario is that they managed to get a hold of the short list the Council after the First Contact War, and used that to find the maker. How short of list are we talking? Gurus asked. Why do you think they have it? Grunt asked him in return. Either they have the list so they can keep an eye out on the people on that list, or so they can kill them. He eyed Miranda and Jacob. Am I wrong? We have the list, Miranda answered, stepping the question aside. There aren't that many names on them, 10 at the least and 25 at the most. And they call that a short list? Chomei wondered aloud. Compared to the rest of the galaxy, yes, Yuki replied. So instead of one grain, we're going after multiple grains, Zaid said, summing it up in his own words. Maybe I should ask for a pay raise. This is getting annoying. There's no need, Jacob told him. There is always a need for a pay raise. Didn't your father teach you that? It was a testament to how much he loathed what his father had become and his self-control that he didn't do anything to attack the man standing next to him when it could have been so easy. No, he didn't. You should shut up now, Grunt warned Zaid with a growl. Yeah, you should, Quan Misley agreed, openly fiddling with her butterfly knife. They both remembered Jacob's father, piece of scum that he was. He didn't back down. What's it to the two of ya? The same thing to me, Naruto said to him, his eyes hard and looking right at him. Stop talking, Zaid, right now. All right, fine, he said with a surrendering shrug of his shoulders. He was smart enough not to mouth off to the boss. That never ended well. We've managed to narrow down the names to a select few, Miranda told them. These are the only names that the tribe has contacted themselves. How would you know that? Ruko asked her. How else? Asked Gurus rhetorically. They were spying on them. You disapprove, she said to him. Not at all, he replied. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Spirits only knew that he had done the same thing before. She gave him a nod of acknowledgement before continuing. There is a slight problem as the location of each person is outdated. We're going to have to find an information broker to find their current location. Fortunately, there's one such broker on Ilium who might be able to help us find them. Who's that? Grun asked her. An Asari that has been making strides in the information world, she answered evasively. You wouldn't know her, but your sensei does. How would I know her? Naruto asked her, a little confused. I've met a few Asaris since I woke up and honestly, not a lot of them have made a good impression on me. Why would he know this particular Asari? Because, she said, turning her head towards him, she served with you 2 years ago. Oh, I see. He looked over at Geras, who seemed to be a little less surprised than he was. Well, now you know where Liara went to, Saiken commented. You can catch up now. I doubt it, he told the slug. Then we're going to Ilium. I'll relay the order to Mr. Moreau, Edi declared over the comm. Grunt's hand reached for his gun but stopped halfway to it. He took a breath and moved his hand back. That is annoying. Naruto rested his back against the cover of the bed and stared at the ceiling. They were on their way to Ilium and to Liara. He wondered if she would be the same as she was 2 years ago. He didn't have much more hope. The information brokers he had come to know during the war had been a paranoid, secretive lot that would sell their information to either side just to save their own hides. That was during a war, Gyuki pointed out to him. You're not in one right now. Technically speaking, I am, he replied. You know what I meant. You're not in a war that the entire known galaxy is in. No, but he's in a war, Kurama said. And if Liara is a good information broker, she'll know about it and be promptly paranoid. You're right to be concerned, Gaki. Besides, you will be fine, you've handled their kind before. But this is Liara we're talking about here. She's a broker. You're going to have to talk to like that first, and your friend second. This isn't going to be Jiraiya's network. That's because Obito was wiping them just as quickly as I was gaining their trust. He was probably even faster, he retorted. When Konoha had learned of Jiraiya's death, as his final apprentice, the spy network had defaulted to him. He only really considered them after Obito vanished the first time to see if they could find him. But since he hadn't immediately reached out to them, they were a little more than suspicious of him, and he had to prove them wrong. But he had to do it during the war, and in the end, it proved to be redundant. She couldn't have changed that much, Koko suggested. It's only been 2 years. 2 years is long enough, the blonde told the Gobi. In the 2 years I was gone from Konoha, everyone else had been promoted to either Chunin or Jonin. Yes, and you still remained a genin, right through Hackett promoted you, Gyuki said, brushing it off like it was nothing. We know that. The point is, people can change if given time, and 2 years is a lot of time. Something started happening with his eyes. They were showing him that the ceiling was rippling like grass from a wind. I'm not the only one seeing this, right? No, you're not, Shikaka told him. What's up with your vision? Is it going blurry on you? Saiken asked. I don't think so. I haven't drunk anything with alcohol. He lifted up his arm and rubbed his eyes. But the ceiling was still doing it when he put it down. He started to go on guard, readying his body for a fight. You really thought that would work? Kurama asked him drily. It was worth a shot. The rippling increased, becoming faster now. Soon enough, the ceiling itself changed, spreading through the rippling. It showed him a scene of a living room, one that looked like it belonged in a shinobi's home. He relaxed his guard, knowing full well what came next. Of course, that didn't mean he was completely ready for it. No! I refuse to allow this! Sakura shouted as she stared down a young woman wearing a Jonin's vest and an Alliance headband. His old teammate had aged. She was older with a few more lines on her faces and gray in her pink hair. If he had to guess, it must have been about 20 years since he saw her last. The young woman pushed her glasses up her nose. Her black hair and stern demeanor were all he needed to know that she was Sakura's and Sasuke's daughter. You can refuse all you want, Mom. But it's happening, she said matter-of-factly. I'm marrying Sven. Do you have any idea where he's from? Sakura asked her, her face a mask of anger and rage. This wasn't the rage he had known, the kind that lit up every time he did something perverted. No, this was a fully grown and mature rage, like what he had seen with her in Midgard. Yes, of course I do. He's from a little place just inside the Black Forest. He showed it to me when we went to Midgard. It was quite lovely to see, a nice quiet town. Not like the city we live in. She gestured around the room as she spoke. I don't care about what place he's from, I care about the country he was born in. Her mother all but shouted at her. You're not going to marry some scum from Midgard. Sarada's eyes narrowed, morphing into the Sharingan. Sven is not scum. He's been my teammate since the start of our outfit and my fiancé. If you didn't want this to happen, you shouldn't have let me join the Marines. I didn't want you, but I was overruled. I will not be overruled now. She pointed an accusing finger at her own daughter. Do you have any idea what those monsters did to your sister? He wasn't a part of that, Mother, you know that. He allowed it to happen. He was my age, barely old enough to fight according to the Midgardians. What could he have done? They could have given the responsible ones to me. But they refused. That makes them guilty. She growled out that last sentence, making it sound much more threatening. But her daughter only got madder. So because a few did that, you would condemn them all? Maybe you're the monster here, Mother. Midgard considers you to be one, maybe it's true. They butchered your sister. She roared. The scene shook like her voice was shaking the house. I know that. How could you think I don't know that? Sarada shouted back. She stopped and took a breath, trying to get her sense of calm back. But it was evident when she spoke that she hadn't gotten it back completely. You only carry that because I never lived up to your expectations and because Mikoto was your favorite daughter. I love all my children. Her voice came down from the roar but was still angry. But you loved her the most because she took after you the most. That's why you chose to let her become the third slug sage. She wanted to be the third slug sage, Sakura told her daughter. How could I refuse her when she asked me that? She didn't seem that convinced about her words. She wanted to be you, and look how that turned out. She thrust a warning finger at her. Don't ever disrespect your sister's memory. You weren't even here when we received her bones and buried them. I was on a mission for the High Jarl. I came back as soon as I could to pay my respects. You know that. You were away on a mission for the man who ordered her to be butchered. Sarada sighed loudly with exasperation. Mother, he didn't order them to be butchered. But he did order them killed. Sakura was holding on to that one fact like it was a lion in a storm. He wasn't aware. He thought they were adults, like a Midgardian warrior would be like. He couldn't have known they were kids. Her eyes fell accusingly on her mother. And you're hardly one to talk about butchery, not since you threatened to murder the man's son in front of him. It was a fair deal since he had Mikoto killed. She wasn't killed right in front of you, Mother, she said insistently yet also angrily. That's what you were threatening to do. That's right, I did. So why didn't you? She challenged. Sakura fell silent but still stared angrily at her daughter, who returned the look just as well. Even though she didn't answer, Naruto knew why. She didn't do it because I stopped her. But it's gotten worse. What the hell's happened to you? Sarada finally broke the silence. I'm marrying Sven. You will not, Sakura told her. If he lays a single hand on you, I will rip him to shreds. Do that and I will return the favor, she said with hard Sharingan eyes. Besides, you would be 4 years too late. Her face grew enraged once more. He rap. He did nothing of the sort. It was consensual. Her daughter cut her off. We love each other, and we are getting married. I came home to tell you because I knew you would be madder if I hadn't. I hoped that you would be able to put your hatred aside to be happy for me. But I can see that's not going to happen. She turned around and started walking away. Where are you going? Sakura demanded. I'm going to finish planning my wedding. You can come if you promise to be polite to Sven and his family. If not, you will not be allowed inside. She reached for the doorknob. Sarada, you walk out of that door, you will not be allowed to come back through, her mother declared. You will be banned from this house. She paused, but only for a moment. Goodbye, Mother. I love you and I hope you will come to your senses one day. Sarada! Shouted Sakura, but it was too late. She had opened the door and walked through, closing it behind her. Sakura, why are you doing this? Naruto asked as she stood there looking at the door. Why would you alienate your daughter? This isn't the Sakura I know. That's the point, Shikaka told him. This is like 20 years after you left. People changed, and she most certainly did. I guess you were right after all. He didn't want to be right, not about that when it came to his old teammates. He watched as another door to the room opened and Sasuke walked in. He was older too. He had a beard now, but it was streaked with gray, same with his hair. He walked over quietly to Sakura and pulled her into a hug. She didn't resist, but she still looked very angry. The scene didn't vanish like it had appeared. All Naruto did was blink, and it was gone. The ceiling was back to its normal self. He stared at it for a long second before sitting up so he could look at something else. Why do I keep seeing that stuff? Why am I seeing that stuff? He asked. The Biju might have wondered why he was asking that question now, but after that little scene the question didn't seem to be important. I honestly have no idea, Kurama told him. Thanks for that, he said sarcastically. You're welcome. But they all knew it to be true. The reason he was having those visions and dreams was just as mysterious as what he had been doing before the tribe finally got their hands on him. The only difference was that the latter was probably going to be much easier to figure out. Ruko only needed to take one whiff of herself to know she stank. It was the kind of stink that could smell 10 feet away. That meant she needed a shower, which meant she needed to go up to the crew deck. She grabbed what consisted of her bathroom kit, a towel and a bar of soap, and stomped up the stairs to the elevator. She didn't run into any of the crew, which she liked. Don't get her wrong, she was getting used to them all, but she still liked her privacy. Too many people around her, and she started getting antsy. And if anyone tried coming down to her lair, she didn't know who started calling her spot that. She had a feeling it was Naruto, but the name stuck. She could and would scare them away. There were only a few people she allowed down there, and she could count that number on one hand. One of the showers was running as she approached the women's bathroom. Great, someone else is already in there. She could walk away and come back later, but that stink was still there. Better to get it over. Punching in the special code given to the crew women, created by Dr. Chukwas and insisted upon by Naruto. He also had one made for the men's, claiming that there were women perverts too. She stepped inside. Hey! That was as far as she got when she realized it was the cheerleader showering. Oh shit. The cheerleader looked back. Once she saw who it was, she frowned. You, she said shortly. Ruko instantly scowled. Yeah, me. She stepped in and the door closed behind her. I need a shower. Huh, I'm amazed that you'd be able to realize you need one. She ignored the taunt. She was here for the shower. She stripped down and tossed her clothes at the wall. Thought we were supposed to get shelves or something in here, she grumbled as she stepped underneath the next shower. The water came rushing down blistering cold. Her lips peeled back instinctively at the sensation. She grabbed her soap and started scrubbing herself down, using quick, almost harsh strokes. Miranda watched her movements with a critical eye. What are you doing? She finally asked. What does it look like, cheerleader? Ruko asked back. She was done scrubbing and started rinsing. I'm showering. She had never seen showers like that. It was too quick, even for a military person. Do you hate me that much that you'd rush through a shower to get away? She asked. The blonde paused and scoffed scornfully. You ain't that important, cheerleader. This is always how I shower. This kind of thing is rare for me. I've never even had a bath. It made sense to Miranda, given what her life had been. Even still, I would have thought you had hot water before. She had never seen anyone take a shower that blistering cold. Why bother when the most I get is cold? Better to stay with what I'm used to. She turned and scowled at her. You done interrogating me, cheerleader? I'm done with my shower. She stepped out of her stall and into hers. Suddenly it became just a little too crowded. Hey! Ruko yelped, doing her best not to step back. She wasn't going to do that again. Even so, with the cheerleader half a step away, she had to admit she had a great body. It had the right balance between curves and muscles. And it was right there. Suddenly, Ruko's throat felt a little dry. Miranda reached out and turned the handle to hot. She stepped back just in time. Enjoy the hot water, Ruko, she told her. Enjoy the shower. You can do that. She glanced at her head. And use some shampoo. I'll leave mine. She passed the shampoo to the blonde and walked away. She dried herself off and left once her clothes were back on. Honestly, do I have to do everything for her? Ruko watched silently as she did all that, still surprised by her actions. Once the brunette was gone, she tucked her head under the water, letting heat wash over her. The cheerleader was right. She could enjoy this. She's still a bitch, she thought to herself determinedly. A bitch with one hell of an ass, though. Location: Ilium. As Naruto walked out of the Normandy with his team behind him, they were met on the docking walkway by an Asari and a pair of mechs holding guns. The Asari came to a stop in front of him and looked him up and down. "Commander Uzumaki?" she asked, taking in the robed and armored human in front of her. She usually took every kind of customer she met in stride, but there was something about that snarling fox beneath the hood that made her pause. "Depends," the human replied in a neutral voice that could have sounded pleasant if he tried to make it so. "Depends?" she repeated, getting annoyed. Her annoyance started to overwrite her hesitation, and she took a step towards him. But the helmet shifted towards her, and the hesitation came back. "It depends on who is asking," he told her. She took a deep breath and started again, this time with a smile. "Welcome to Nos Astra. We've been instructed to waive all docking and administration fees for your visit. My name is Karina. If you need information about the area, it would be my pleasure to assist you." There, a nice and polite greeting. She was back into the flow of things. "Why do I get the free pass?" he asked simply. "Who gave the order?" She could answer that question. "The order came from Liarazzoni, who paid all fees on your behalf." She saw that some of the party was making eye contact with the mechs. The way they were looking at them, they were sizing them up for a fight. That was something not needed. She turned on her Omni tool and programmed the mechs to walk away. When they did, the looks vanished. She also asked that I direct you to speak with her at your convenience. She's near the trading floor. The helmet tilted upwards and looking all around. She knew that he was taking in all the sights of the city, the tall towers, the vehicles, and everything in between. It was perfectly understandable, since he was a literal man out of time. Finally, he looked back at her. "Tell me about Nos Astra." She could answer that. "It's an exciting city. We see a lot of new cultures and goods because of our proximity to the terminus system. At the same time, Ilium is still an Asari world. You should be as safe here as you would be on the Citadel." The blonde woman behind him snorted derisively. "That just means you gotta watch your back more than usual," she declared loudly. She would have said something, if the armored human hadn't spoken first. "I was on the Citadel when Sovereign attacked. I didn't feel safe." The only thing she could say to that was some time ago, Commander. Things are much better now, safer too. However, I would recommend against signing anything while you're here." "Why?" "Ilium is a free trade world, Commander. Contract term requirements are more relaxed here than on other planets. It's a small price to pay for keeping our competitive edge in goods from the terminus systems." "What gets traded here?" he asked. "Anything you can imagine, Commander," she told him. "Ilium is a wonderful world for those who can afford it. In order to remain competitive as a terminus systems port, we've relaxed many of the standards you'd find on other Asari worlds. Most drugs are legal, provided they are labeled properly. You can buy almost any weapon or technology. You can even buy indentured servants." The air suddenly felt 20 degrees colder, which on Ilium was saying something. "I thought only the Batarians stooped to slaving nowadays," he said in a very, very cold voice. She had a feeling that he was beginning to get angry. So she tried to amend her words. "We try to avoid calling it slavery. All indentured servants on Ilium have voluntarily agreed to a term of service. Most chose indentured service as a means to pay off debt or avoid imprisonment. A contract holder is responsible for the well-being of her servants, and a servant's duties are agreed upon before the contract is signed." The air warmed up again, but only just. "I see," he said shortly. "That will be all." She took it as a sign to leave, and she took it. "Again, welcome to our city, Commander. Please enjoy your stay." She turned and left, moving as quickly as she could while still looking graceful while doing it. After all, she had a job to maintain. "Look at her, she's almost running," Isabu remarked. "You scared her," Chome accused Naruto while she finally vanished from sight. "And?" he asked back. He didn't get an answer. A short walk down the walkway led through the bottom side of a building and then out onto a terrace. On that U-shaped terrace there were people of all kinds of species, and they all had one intention: sell or buy like nobody's business. The air was filled with the voices saying buy or sell at different prices and using different volumes, making a clashing kind of sound to fill the ear. "These people are crazy," Shikaka declared. Who would do this for a life? You must have seen this kind of thing before, his Jinchuriki told him. I have, and it's still confusing. Well, at least they're getting some fresh air, Saiken remarked. That's good for them. Plus they get a very nice view. If they bother to look up at the screens, the Tanuki pointed out. They both had a point about the layout. The terrace didn't have a roof overhead so they could see the dusk sky, at least, he was assuming it was the dusk sky, and the rest of the city. And Naruto could admit that it was an impressive-looking city, almost like the citadel on a planet. The only real difference he felt was the heat. It was much hotter here than on the citadel. Are all Asari planets this hot? Grunt asked. The Krogan didn't look like he was sweating, but Naruto didn't know how Krogan sweated at all. Trust me, it's hotter down closer to the surface, Miranda told him. That's why there are so many skyscrapers. Considering the many skyscrapers stabbing the air, she might have a point. But that begged the question. How do you know about the heat? Naruto asked, turning his head slightly to look at her. Any organization worth their weight knows about Ilium and what's to gain from it, she answered. I've been sent here before and I know how things work. Good to know. Thank you. How do you want to go about here, Commander? Gurus asked him. We're a big group. We're bound to get noticed. You're right, we need to split up, he said as he turned to face them all. The entire team stood in front of him. None of them had their hands on their weapons, but that didn't mean they weren't close by. If it's all the same to you, I would like to check in with a few contacts I have on planet, Miranda said to him before he could speak. It sounded like a normal request, and he didn't see much wrong with it. But that didn't mean he was just going to let her go alone. All right, but Ruko goes with you. What? Said both of them at the same time but at different pitches. However, they had the same level of outrage. That way both of you can keep an eye on each other. You're leaving me to babysit her while I go check in? Miranda asked him while pointing her thumb at Ruko. Fuck you too, cheerleader, his sister snarled. Helping her out with the shower was one thing. This was another. This is grounds for a disaster, Naruto, Saiken warned him. You know what? You're right. Eric and Musashi you go with. Grunt and Gurus, you're with me as I go see Liara. What about us? Jacob asked, gesturing to himself along with Quan Misli, Zaid, and Morden. You guys go shopping. Find any improvements to the weapon and armor racks while also seeing if you can any improvements to the ship. What about other stuff? Can we indulge ourselves? Zaid asked. He looked at the merc, weary of the grin he had on his face. Define stuff. Oh, you know. Good food, a book, and maybe even a toy or two. Why do I have the funny feeling that those are code words for something else? He asked silently, still eyeing that grin. As always, the fox had the answer. You've spent way too much time with Jiraiya. That was all the answer he needed. He could have refused the merc, but that wouldn't have ended well for either him or Zaid. Don't go overboard, he finally answered with. I don't want to hear about a toy store has had all of its toys bought in one fell swoop or how a restaurant doesn't have any more food. Get some shelves for the bathrooms, Ruko said suddenly. She didn't quail as the eyes turned on her. What? We need them. Zaid took it in stride. You got it. By now. He walked right onto the terrace, soon vanishing into the crowds. But he still had his calm in. Stay in contact with the rest of the team, Naruto told him through it. Yeah, I get the point. He looked at everyone else. All right, scatter, he told them. And they did. Soon, he was left with his friend and his student. All right, where to now? Asked Grunt, idly scratching at his arm. His sensei noticed what he was doing. Grunt, the doc told you not to scratch at that. He pulled his hand away instantly. Sorry. If there was one person who could match Naruto in making Grunt settle down, it was Dr. Chukwas. The difference was that she didn't have to throw him across the room to make her point. For some reason he wasn't sure of, she was scarier when she was sitting in her chair or looming over him on the medical table. But where do we go now? That Asari said she was near the trading floor, Gurus remarked. I think it's safe to say that this is the trading floor. That doesn't answer my question. Time for a lesson, Grunt, Naruto told him. Take a look and tell me where you would think she would be. The Krogan frowned but stepped forward to take a look at the terrace. All he could see were people, and more people. They were everywhere, crowding every place. If people wanted to move, they practically had to fight their way through the crowds. He turned his head slowly, trying to make sure he got everything. But all he could see were people. Well? Asked Gurus. Give me a moment. I did. He stifled a growl of frustration, catching the Turian's attention. Was that for me? No, I'm trying to concentrate, and you're not helping. Sorry, you really can't tell with the Krogan. Is he always like this? He asked his sensei. Pretty much, Naruto answered. The helmet covered his face, but it could not hide his slight amusement. He used to have another Krogan to work off of. The rest of us were convinced that they would end up marrying each other. That was just you, Gurus retorted. That explains a lot, Grunt said. Focus, Grunt, the blonde told him. I can't. There are too many people out here. He couldn't see anything on that terrace. Is it a problem? The way his sensei asked it made it sound like he was missing an obvious thing that could make this all a lot easier for him. Yes. Then turned it into an advantage, he ordered, like it was the easiest thing to do. But Grunt didn't know how he could do that. Can you help me? He asked, hoping he would say yes. I won't give you the answer. Grunt growled in frustration again. But would you like a hint? The blonde finished. Yes. He would take anything he could to help him. Take the people out of what you're looking for. Don't think about where she might be in the crowd, rather where she wouldn't be. Somehow, and he didn't know that how, those words made sense to him. He looked back at the terrace with a renewed look. Well, don't leave us hanging, Gurus told him. Can I shoot him? He asked his sensei, ignoring the Turian. No. What if it was just in the knee or something? He snorted in amusement, especially with Gurus's slightly panicked look. Grunt, focus on the task at hand. But Gurus does have a point. He does? I do? Asked Gurus, sounding a little surprised. Yes, Naruto said to them both. It helps if you talk it out with us, not keep it in your head all for yourself. Oh yeah, that, the Turian agreed quickly. Neither of them needed to know that he just wanted the baby Krogan to hurry it up and give them the answer. Naruto turned his head slightly towards him. He couldn't see anything, and that just made him more concerned about what the blonde might know what he meant. If she's here, then she'll want a clear view of everything on the terrace, Grunt told them both, looking at the crowd still. That could mean she's sitting at an angle that allows her to see every part of it. But she's a respected information broker, and that would mean she has a set of rooms or even a building to work in, his sensei said back. He looked over at the open air. I don't see rooms this way. I noticed that too. So it's on this side. The Krogan jerked his head at the actual terrace and the building it jutted out from. And if she has a set of rooms, she wouldn't have them at the base level of the terrace. And why would that be? She would be looking into the crowds, not at them. That would imply some kind of difference in height. So that would mean her rooms would be on a second floor or higher. That made sense to the Krogan. Yes. He lifted his head to look at the second-story windows. When he found the biggest set that was also the widest right dead center of the terrace, he pointed it out. That one, that's the one we go to. Why? It's jutted out and has big windows so she would be able to see everything on the terrace. It's also in the center so she would be able to see everything equally, like a head looking down at his clan, he explained, going point by point. Almost like how the head of the clan would take the top of the table at any formal gathering, Kurama remarked, remembering the times Mito would sit next to Hashirama in said gatherings. Naruto could see how the fox would take that, remembering a few of the clan dinners he had been invited to and the ones the Konoha 12 would host, since most of them felt like they were a clan all by themselves, although whoever got the top of the table had been a constant argument. So, you think that's where we need to go? He said to Grunt. Yeah, I do, his student answered, nodding his head. Then by all means lead the way. They started walking through the crowd, pushing their way through when they had to. Grunt led the way as he was told. Naruto had been teaching him how to read the flow of a crowd, where it was going and how fast the tide would be like. In the case of this crowd, the flow would be non-existent, and it would be easier to get closer to the wall. We should go to the wall to get through quicker, he told Naruto and Gurus. He didn't wait for a reply or a confirmation, choosing to go right for the wall and hope the others followed him. When he reached the wall, they were right there behind him. Now they had a much easier time getting through now with only having to deal with people on one side. But their walk was interrupted when someone said Commander Uzumaki. They stopped and Naruto looked at the speaker, an Assyrian, a modest, if not slightly stained, dress waiting against the wall a few steps behind him. Yes? He asked. You're Commander Naruto Uzumaki? She asked, stepping forward to look more closely at him. I guess you would say your aura. I'd recognize you anywhere. The orange tints on her face scrunched up. She frowned and quickly looked around. Something the matter? He asked her, his hands slipping down to his pockets. She turned her head back to him. I was asked to give you a message if I saw you. It's from a friend you made on Noveria. Noveria? His mind was already going back to that icy planet and what happened there. He didn't make any friends there as far as he knew. He only did his job even though it came to a part that he hadn't liked. What's the message? She stepped closer. For a moment, he thought she would kiss him. But then her eyes rolled back into her head and her voice added on a second depth to it. Uzumaki, she began. We hide. We burrow. We build. But we know that you seek those who soured the songs of our mothers. When the time comes, our voice will join yours, and our crescendo will burn the darkness clean. Thank you, Uzumaki. The Rachni will sing again, because of you. The Rachni, he thought, now realizing who the friend was supposed to be. He hadn't considered the queen he freed to be just a hostage that needed to get out of her prison. And now she had come back to remind him that she was out there and still his friend. But there was one question he had. How does she know my name? I never told her. I really don't think that the Asari is going to know the answer to that, Kurama told him. But it turns out she did. We heard the Blue Taken One speak it, she answered with a small smile on her lips. And there are songs sung through time. All we had to do was listen and we heard yours. Your voice has sung a song that has forged an age once, and we are certain that you will do so again. It will be a change that will sweep the galaxy. No pressure or anything, Sun remarked. Way to kill the moment, Shikaka said back. And I thought that was my job. Thanks for the praise, Naruto told the Asari. He felt like her words were a little over the top. He only stopped a war, not forged an age. But it was pointless to argue that right now. I don't suppose you can let go of that Asari now? The Asari's pupils rolled back into sight. The Rachni Queen does not control my thoughts, Commander. That was merely the message I was asked to deliver. I encountered her on an uncharted world. She saved my life. More than that, she gave me a purpose. They are an amazing people, Commander Uzumaki. The galaxy owes you a great debt for giving them a second chance. I did what I had to do. But if you see her again, tell her I said thanks for the message and the support. She bowed her head. Be well, Commander Naruto Uzumaki. You will not see me again. She walked away from them, disappearing into the crowd. They watched her go until they couldn't see her anymore. So, that just happened, Gurus remarked. Yeah, it did, Naruto agreed. I bet you weren't expecting that kind of a thank you from Arachne. I wasn't expecting any kind of a thank you. But thinking about the Rachni made him think about something else too. Something he did before leaving Noveria. Flashback, he walked back into the empty labs. Benizia's body and the body of her commandos have sheets draped over them so they'd be protected until picked up. Staring at Liara's mother again made him feel regret. He didn't want to do it, but he had to. There was no other way. The only good thing he had done about it was making sure Liara didn't watch. He turned his head away from her body and looked out at the lab. He had taken B's glasses off, letting the Rinnegan shine in the room. He walked slowly, letting his footsteps fade into silence before taking another. Shino? He called out to the empty room. Shino, are you still there? He waited for an answer, hoping to have that presence come back. But all he got was silence. Shino, it's me. What are you doing? Kurama asked him. I don't know. Maybe trying to make sure I'm not crazy. He looked back at the glass container where the queen had been held, thinking that maybe he would see his friend there. But there was nothing. Well, you're not succeeding, Isabu remarked. I noticed. He looked back at where he thought Shino had been standing but saw nothing. A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. It echoed faintly in the air before fading away too quickly. But his tenants heard it. What's the matter, Naruto? Matatabi asked with concern. I guess I'm feeling lonely. It was a little weird to admit it, but there it was. How can you feel lonely? You are not alone. Yeah, you got us, Sun pointed out. And you've got your team, Kurama reminded him. He leaned against a nearby rail. Is it my team? The Biju all looked at one another when he asked that question and then looked at him once more. They weren't sure what he meant by that because it was obvious to them, so one of them had to remind him of it. And that fell to Shikaku. Yeah, fairly sure that it's yours, he told the blonde. You command it, and all. I know that, but it's not really mine. My team was Team 7 and the Konoha 12. Those are the guys I want by my side for all of this. Naruto, are you feeling homesick? Matatabi asked him. I guess. This is new, the fox remarked, now just as concerned as the cat was. But he shook his head in the negative. No, I don't think it's new. It's been around since I woke up but never really came up to the surface until now. And why now? Asked Saiken. Is it because you thought you felt your friend looking at you? Chomei asked him. I know I felt him looking at me. He knew the weight of those eyes anywhere. Shino's look was silent just like him, but they could also radiate disappointment when he wanted. If he leveled that look at someone, that person didn't have a chance. It was most likely your mind playing around with you about the situation, Gyuki suggested. I mean, you were dealing with a large bug and he was from a clan that was known for their bugs. He was there, Gyuki. I could feel him, he insisted. Naruto, he's dead, Kurama told him bluntly. They're all dead. They'd been dead for the 2,000 years. I know that, Kurama. I'd known that since they told me I was asleep for 2,000 years. It had been a blow like none he had ever felt before learning just how long he was gone. It almost felt like a dream that was trying to delude him. It was only when he woke up the next day that he knew that wasn't the case. So, what's the point of trying to figure out if you felt him? The last time I checked, you can't see the dead. Kurama! Snapped Matatabi. Have some decency. He doesn't need decency. He needs a kick in the head or something close to it. He's right, Naruto conceded. He pushed off the railing and put the shades back on. I can't see the dead and I know Shino's dead. We don't have time for this. Saren is still out there and I have to catch him. He walked back to the entrance and left the labs. But he still paused at the door for a moment. End flashback. Naruto, are you okay? Geras asked him, snapping him out of his trip down memory lane. Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, let's go find Liara. He walked away and went through the crowd to find Liara. As it turned out, the windows Grunt pointed were a part of administration. Liara's gone up in the world, Geras remarked as he stared the word glaring bright blue on the wall in front of them. To its left was a staircase that went up. If they looked up, they would have seen a hint of a desk at the top. Yeah, she has, Naruto agreed, looking at the same word. You know, maybe I should stay out here and keep an eye on things, the Turian suggested, taking a step back. The blonde looked at him with some surprise in his eyes. Why? You know her. I knew Liara the archaeologist. This would be Liara the information broker. That's someone else entirely. Geras, it's Liara. It's not like she's going to throw you through the windows if you make her mad. We also thought she and Maya were going to get and stay together. And now they are on 2 different planets in 2 different systems. It's been 2 years, Naruto. He walked over to the nearby wall and rested his back against it. Look, I'll stay out here until you're done. That way, I can keep an eye out for anyone who might be after us. Naruto knew better to argue something like this. Alright, fine. Come on, Grunt. Why are we leaving him like that? Grunt asked him as they walked up the stairs. Because he wanted to be there, and he had a point. I'm not going to begrudge him on that. When they reached the top of the stairs, they saw the desk fully and the Asari sitting behind it. Hello, Commander Uzumaki, she greeted him, standing up. Liara will be pleased to see you. And who are you supposed to be? He asked her. I am Nixorus. Liara relies on me. For what? He asked. Acquiring useful information, she answered. I don't have her network of contacts, but I supply her with supplement data. It's really an honor to work with her. That would be for her, Shikaku declared. There is no with here. If this was a with situation, she wouldn't be manning the secretary desk. But that raises another question, Saiken pointed out. Naruto could see where the slug was going and went there. What kind of rep does Liara have on planet? He asked the secretary. She is greatly respected. In a few short years, she's amassed a sizable network of connections. She could have even more political power than she already wields if she wasn't so focused on her personal goals. But I believe that she should tell you about that, not me. And I call bullshit, Yuki said. She definitely has an opinion about that. We didn't come to talk to her, Naruto told the Hachibi. I'll be going in now, he told the assistant. Grunt, stay out here. Why? His student asked in annoyance. I'm trusting you to keep my back safe. Can you do that? It was a simple question but made the Krogan swell his chest and nodded. Yeah, I can. Good. He turned to the door opposite of the desk and walked towards it. It opened up to reveal a luxurious office with room to walk in, chairs that would be comfortable, a desk that loudly declared its authority, and the very windows that Grunt had pointed out. But what he chose to look at was his old teammate. Liara wasn't wearing any armor or even her scientist uniform that he had found her in. Instead, she wore a dark green dress that had white accents down the sleeves and the back. He knew about the back since it was facing him while she was talking to someone via hologram, a human by the looks of it. Have you ever faced an Asari commando unit before? She asked him, her voice cool and collected. Few humans have. I'll make it simple. Either you pay me, or I'll flay you alive. With my mind, she finished, ending the call. Naruto made his presence known. You know, I believe your mother used that same line on me, he said casually. I hope that you won't try to use it on me. Like I've said before, I found them lacking. She spun around, saw him, and happiness shined mutely in her eyes. Naruto, she said with a breath of relief. In the next breath she said, Nixurus, hold my calls. Yes, Lady Liara, the assistant said from outside the door. Lady? Repeated the armored blonde. I thought it was Doctor. She chuckled and stepped in for a hug. Wait. He lowered the hood and retracted the helmet, letting her see his head. There, now you can hug me. She did just that, and it was a tight one. It almost felt like she was never going to let him go again. It was a nice feeling. When Joker was rescued, he told us what you did, she said to him right before she punched him in the shoulder. Ow, that actually hurt, he said, stepping back to rub the shoulder. Never underestimate an angry woman, Matatabi advised. You don't think I didn't know that? He asked back. After all the things he had been through in pissing Tsunade and Sakura off, that shoulder punch was a little underrated. You shouldn't have done that, Liara chastised him. You shouldn't have sacrificed yourself. Hey, it was Joker. I couldn't just leave him to die. That still does not change the facts. And now I've been hearing that you work for the Akatsuki now. Her voice didn't change, but he had a feeling there a small drop of disappointment in there. But he had his defense. I would say that I'm more conscripted via blackmail than actually working with them. When they saved me from the tribe, I really couldn't go anywhere else. I don't know how to fly a ship. He should probably figure out how to do that soon. A concerned look passed across her face. Saved you? She repeated. What does that mean? He sighed. Look, the last thing I remember on the Normandy was casting the Kuchios no Jutsu just as the ship was tearing itself apart. I came to in a tribe lab. They had me there as an experiment in trying to utilize chakra for non-humans. The Akatsuki raided the lab and got me out. So, you don't remember anything that happened since you woke up? Nothing for the past 2 years? She asked. There was something in the way she asked him that question that got his interest. Nothing, he replied with a nod. It's a complete blank. Although. He trailed off and thought about what he should say next. Although what? Nothing, never mind, he said, waving it off. Let's talk about for a second here. Why were you asking about what happened to me? Her face held its neutrality. I would have thought it obvious. It was. But you also know something else. He held her gaze as he spoke. She knew something about what happened in those 2 years. Silence reigned in the office as he waited for the answer. Clouds and cars through the sky outside the windows, but he kept his gaze on her. It didn't take her long to answer. I've heard whispers and rumors of sightings of you for 6 weeks after the Normandy was destroyed. And then there was nothing that I found about you was varied, but they all agreed on one thing: you didn't stay long. It was like you were on the run from something. 6 weeks? Was that how long he had been doing whatever the hell it was that he had been doing? What was it? 6 weeks was a long time for something to happen. Gah, not knowing is a real pain. He silently raged. Outwardly he asked, is that it? Not entirely. What I do know is that after the Normandy blew up, the shadow war between the Akatsuki and the tribe of Athane flared up. A third group even joined in, The agents of the Shadow Broker. That was a new one, and it all came to one question. You think they were all coming after me? The tribe and the Shadow Broker, he understood. The Akatsuki was where he had his doubts. They claimed to be different from what he knew, but if they had been chasing him. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. That was annoying, as was all of this. But he couldn't take it out on her. She had nothing to do with it. All right, let's focus on something else. Like what? You, he told her, smiling. You have contacts now? She smiled too and walked over to her desk to sit down. A few, she answered. Sources, contacts, even a little hired muscle. I've been working as an information broker. It's paid the bills since you, well, for the past 2 years. And now you're back, waging war with the tribe. He took the seat in front of her desk, relaxing into it a little bit. You know what you're talking about, he said in praise. She shrugged her shoulders. Information is my business now. And if you need information on finding people, I'm happy to help. In that case, I came to the right person. He stopped and looked around the room, turning his head in a big circle and looking at everything very carefully. Liara let him do a complete circulation before she spoke. Is something the matter? He looked back at her. How bugged are you? She didn't laugh, chuckle, or even try to protest that wasn't the case. She didn't explode or freak out. Instead she said, fairly well, I should think. I'm certain that they're changed out every 2 weeks or so. Why? Her fingers started idly rapping against the desk. I want to talk about my business without people listening in. You got a way to fix that? I'm afraid not, she answered, her fingers playing out a rhythm against the metal of the desk. Believe me, I've tried. But they are effective in making sure that they are unhackable. Shit. I really can't talk about what's going on if they're listening in. His eyes followed the fingers as they tapped away, noticing how they were playing a specific tune. If it's any consolation, everyone who's listening in knows about the war between the Akatsuki and the tribe. The fingers were doing a little dance as they tapped, sliding down the desk until they tapped at what he was assuming was a drawer beneath. Are any of them actually involved in the war? A few, I believe. Tribe or Akatsuki? He asked, watching the fingers come to a stop just off the desk and holding there. Both, she answered, idly rubbing the side of her head. I can't let either of them find out. You don't trust the Akatsuki? If you were in my position, would you? She paused for a moment, and then shook her head. No, I wouldn't, she said. Her head tilted to the side just the slightest of inches. Good. He bent his head the same amount of inches. Her fingers pressed down against the desk and his ears filled up. It took him a minute to get them both unplugged, working his jaw to do so. When they were unplugged, he looked at Liara. Can we speak freely now? He asked her. She smiled, much more like he remembered. Yes, of course we can. He looked over at the desk. There seemed nothing out of the ordinary with it, a sleek black thing of a desk that dominated the space they were in, filled with screens showing all kinds of things that he didn't understand. But he couldn't see what it was that she did. Mind filling me in? It was a custom-ordered desk, built in with the seals to block sound, sight, and smell, she explained. It's for those conversations that I need to have without anyone listening in. Right now, the people listening in are hearing and seeing nothing but static. Damn, I'm impressed, Sun said. She has grown in the past 2 years, Matatabi said with some pride. Yeah, in more places than one, Shikaku declared. Mind out of gutter, Naruto ordered him. What? I was talking about how she got more confident. 2 years ago, she could barely string sentences together without feeling embarrassed by speaking out loud. He has you there, Karama remarked in amusement. It was rare that happened, considering who the Tanuki was and all. The blonde knew that, but he wasn't going to wallow in that. There were more important things to worry, mainly what Liara had just said. Liara, you don't have any chakra. How could you use those seals? She smirked. That's the beauty of it. The desk is rigged to drain just enough chakra from a human to activate the seals and keep them flowing. Haven't you noticed that your chakra is being drained? Now that she talked about it, he did notice it. It was a small thing, barely even minuscule. But his chakra was being drained all the same. Once he figured that out, he eyed the desk wearily. Does this thing have a range? Only to the chair, she answered. If you step beyond, they'll see and hear you just fine. So, I would recommend that you don't move. Fair enough, he conceded. He wasn't planning on moving anyway. So, what are you here for? Her smirk vanished, and she became serious once more. I'm looking for a couple of people, one of which is in Aseri, Urzia Legos. Do you know of her? She nodded once. She was on the short list to study chakra before the Alliance firmly said no to the Council. She looked hard at him. The rest of those people, are they on the list too? He nodded. Do you have any idea of where she or the rest of them are? He was hoping that she would have, at the very least, a good solid lead to follow through with. He didn't want to spend another 3 weeks hunting for a speck of rust in a sea of swords. Ha, are you kidding? Kurama asked him, like you're going to get that lucky. I don't have an exact location on her, much less the rest of those names, Liara said. Sorry. Even though she said the word, she said it with an unapologetic face. See? Shut up, he told the fox. What do you have on her? He asked her. If she was an information broker worth the information she accumulated, she would have at least to go with. I have sightings. Like you, she seems to be on the run. But she has had an armed guard of at least 4 people with her at each sighting. None of them are human, and they all have a triangle on their shoulder plates. Shit, the tribe, he swore. Now that meant this mission was going to be much harder. There was a very good chance that they would have her put nicely away inside one of their bases, probably one of their more heavily armed ones too. Any idea where they are taking her? He asked Liara. Not concrete ones. What I do have are based on mostly her sightings, the ships she was taken to, and where the local relays are pointed out. He frowned. That wasn't what he had been expecting. There had to be more to go on than just that. Why isn't there more? She saw the frown on his face but still kept hers neutral. The people I have watching her are only doing so because the tribe has taken an interest in her. I'm sorry, but their war with the Akatsuki is not a main concern for me. Not even if it was for me? I only had rumors and hearsay about you. I couldn't put all my trust in you because of that, she said with a gentle rebuke. He heard the rebuke. His first reflex would have been to snap back with his own rebuke, but that wouldn't have gotten either of them anywhere. He bit down hard on what he was going to say and took a deep breath. Are you sure you have nothing more solid? He finally asked. She paused, considering her words before she spoke them. I might, but it's unconfirmed. Then I can be the one to confirm it. If it got him a lead, he would take what he could get. If that is what you wish, I can hardly stop you, can I? She asked rhetorically and with a small smile on her lips. He smiled back. Well, if you want to, but I don't think it's going to do anything in the end. Her smile grew 2 inches wider. Too true, she admitted. Then she lost the smile. All right, it's the most recent sighting of the doctor. The contact took a risk and followed them onto the ship they were leaving on. Gutsy smuggling himself onto a tribe ship, the blonde remarked. He was assuming that they were like any other high-class ship out there, and it would be that person's ass if they were to get caught. It was a woman, and they didn't catch her. He saw the eyeful he was getting from her and instantly protested to protect himself. I didn't say anything about that, only that it was a gutsy move. As you say, she said, still keeping her neutrality. In any case, she followed them to a planet on the outskirts of Hannerspace. It's a planet much like their homeworld, consisting of 75 to 85% water, with most of their colonies on the water's surface or near what few islands they have. That didn't seem like the tribe's usual standard. They always seem to favor placing their bases on planets that have no colonies whatsoever. But then again, he didn't know just how many bases they had out there, nor did he go to them all yet. They have a base there? The contact could confirm that, and that it was in the deeper regions of the ocean. But that was it. She reached over and tapped one of her screens a couple of times. I've just sent the coordinates to your Omni tool. You can upload them into your ship and go from there. Thanks, Liara. He started to rise out of his chair but stopped in mid-motion. He held it there for a moment as he considered whether or not to trust her with what was on his mind. It was a risky move to do so. She was an information broker now. She could very well sell him out for the right price. But she's a friend, one part of him silently protested. If we can't trust a friend, who can you trust? You say that, but you still haven't forgiven Quan Misli, another part countered. It had a good point, and he winced inwardly at it. But he sat down again and faced Liara again. Is there something else? She asked him. Yeah, one more thing, he answered, looking at the desk carefully. Is that seal still activated? Yes. Good. He reached into his robe and pulled out the OSD he found recently. Could you play this for both of us? He asked, holding it out for her. She eyed it for a moment, looking at it like it would bite her hand off. But she took it and plugged it into a port on her desk. A screen popped up and like he had expected, he saw himself in the video. He was clutching his shoulder while blood leaked out from underneath his hand. Fuck, his video self groaned, looking at his shoulder. I know I heal good, but these bullets still hurt like hell. Then he looked up at the video. Hey, just give me a minute. I wasn't expecting to be shot. She's not looking surprised, Kurama noted as he watched Liara while the video played. She does have an excellent poker face nowadays, Sun replied. And while that was a good point, it didn't change the fact that Liara didn't seem surprised to see the video. I don't know whether you'll be getting this one before the previous one. It's only been 2 hours since I made that one. But then again, I expected this place to be safe, the video Naruto remarked as he reached for a roll of bandages and a kunai, taking off his shirt in the process. The wound did look bad and messy, probably more so since the bullet was still in there. I've had my last meeting with Oka in those 2 hours. I think that we've finally figured out what the true history is, not what the Council or even the Protheans tried to feed the rest of the galaxy. But I don't know the details. What I do know is that my theory was right. Chakra didn't just belong to humans, and we've also been around for much longer than previously thought. It's possible that we are even older than the Protheans. How, I don't know. But I'm going to find out. And if I can't in the time I have, it's going to have to be you that finds out. I have to balance doing while leading everyone else on a chase while secretly sabotaging them. He took the kunai in hand and pointed it at the wound. I'm going to stop the video here because no one needs to see this. Just keep doing what you're doing. Everything will turn out just fine. As his free hand reached for the video, probably to turn it off, he could be heard saying if Sakura or Tsunade saw me doing this, they would probably. That's where the video stopped and vanished. The two of them were left looking at one another. Interesting, but what does this have to do with me? Liara finally asked him. This is not the only OSD I've found. There have been others and I am certain there are more out there. I showed this to you because I'm hoping that you'll be able to help me in finding more. He held out his hand expectantly. She unplugged the OSD and handed it back. I will keep an eye out for such OSDs, but I make no promises. I'll have one of my contacts reach out to you if I find anything. I'll take it. If it helped him figure it all out, he would gladly take any help given to him. We're going to have to end this meeting with them seeing us, she told him, her eyes drifting all around the room. Are you ready to go public? Just one more thing, he replied, raising a hand to stop her from doing anything. What? What happened between you and Maya? I thought that the two of you were going strong, seeing her parents, all that. She fell back into that neutral expression again. Things change in 2 years. We went our separate ways after what happened to the Normandy. I haven't looked back since then. Liara, please, don't try and convince me otherwise. The time I had with Maya was sweet, and I will always hold her dear to my heart. But if I wish to continue being successful in this line of work, I can't have any possible ways to get me in danger. He wanted to say more, to try and protest her words. But he fell silent when he noticed the uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't believe what she was saying. If he pushed it, she would doubt, and she was right, for the moment. She couldn't allow weakness. However, that didn't mean he was just going to leave it like that. They would just come back to it at a later date. All right, fine. Thank you. Now, shall we? We better make it loud, sound like we're just coming out of an argument. That would make the listeners think he wasn't successful. She nodded. Good point. She pressed the desk again, and he felt the drain on his chakra stop. As she had reached, he quickened his breathing to make it look like he had just stopped shouting a few seconds ago. Are you certain? He asked with a voice that seemed to barely hold in frustration and anger. Yes, I am sure, she replied, sounding a little frustrated like he was. Damn it. He grabbed the edge of the seat like he was about to stand up. Wait a moment. There is something you can do for me. He scowled convincingly enough. You didn't have anything to offer me and you want me to do something for you? That's not a fair deal, Liara. The galaxy is not a fair place, Naruto. I would have thought you of all people would have known that to be the truth. He growled loudly enough so the people listening could hear him. He slammed his butt back into the seat and glared at her. All right, what do you want then? If you could disable security at key points around Ilium, you'd get me the information I need. That would help me a great deal. It was a simple offer and quite easy to the right person. And while he knew someone who could do that easily, there was still the matter of why she was asking that question. Don't you have someone who can take care of that for you? What makes you need outside help? She stood up and looked out the windows, down at the people on the terrace below. I don't know anyone else I can trust. Hacking the security node won't get you the data. It just creates a minor glitch in the system. You'll have a short time to find a local server left vulnerable by that glitch and upload the data to my system. I'm leaving my own system vulnerable so that the data can be imported during that short time, she explained, sitting back down in her chair. He took a deep breath and looked at her with flinty eyes. What would I have to do? It's very simple. When you hack one, a server will open up somewhere nearby for a short time. You can download data from there, if you hurry. He took another deep breath. Fine, I'll do it, if nothing else as a favor. She smiled a little at those words. Thank you, Naruto. He stood up from the seat. Don't thank me yet. But even though his voice was hard and irritated, he gave her a quick wink. Before you go, I have a question for you. What is it? The latest album of Biju, are you in it? She asked, actually curious about the answer. What do you think? While he asked, his tenants were sniggering and chuckling loudly in his head. It sounds like it, but I can't be sure. She looked at him expectantly. Well? All she got out of him was a mysterious smile. When he walked out of the office and down the steps, Grunt followed him. They didn't say a word to each other as they went down, Naruto not knowing how far the bugs were planted out and Grunt following his lead. But when they got to the bottom, Grunt broke the silence by saying, What's he doing? What's who doing, Grunt? Naruto asked. The Turian, he said. He's sitting down at that table with the human. He pointed over to the nearby table in question. He looked at where his student was pointing. True enough, Gers was sitting at the table with a human woman dressed in a rather flattering uniform of dark pink and white, while her hair was done up in a business knot. They looked like they were completely relaxed and enjoying themselves. All he could think about the sight was, That's all you're going to say? Saiken asked him. There's really nothing I can say. He walked over to the table just as they both finished a laugh. You know, I said that you could use your scar as a way to pick up people, Gris. But I never would have thought you would actually show off the scar, he said to his teammate, looking down at him. Gris looked surprised but for only a moment. Then he smiled. As flattering as that comment is, Commander, I am not flirting with this lady. I'm getting to know her again. You should too, considering we met her at the same time. He gestured over to the lady as he spoke. She smiled, flashing teeth that were only slightly stained, and held her hand to him, standing up. It's a pleasure to meet you again, Commander, she said. I'm Gianna Parasini. We met because of a certain corrupt asshole of a Solarian on a freezing hell of a planet. That name and that description of Noveria rang enough bells in his head to make him remember her. She had been a part of the planet's internal affairs and went to him to bust the Solarian she had been gunning for. Needless to say, they did, and that had been pretty much the last he had seen of her. It's good to see you again, Gianna, he told her, taking the hand in question and giving it a good shake. So, did you guys run into each other, or was this the reason Gers wanted to stay out here? Actually, it's a little bit of both, his teammate answered. She recognized me and flagged me when we went by. I sat down for a drink, we talked for about a minute, next thing I knew I was helping her bust an Asari who had illegal tech from Noveria. Gee, why does that sound familiar? Kurama asked, rhetorically sarcastic, eyeing his Jinchuriki. Don't look at me, he protested. Oh, I'm looking at you and your track record. Don't deny it, you were there. He knew he couldn't deny it. He didn't even try. So, you helped her out then? He sure did, Gianna said with a satisfied smile. I love nailing Asari. So ageless and superior, then you get them and they squeal like schoolgirls. That paints a nice image, Matatabi remarked. It sure does, Isaba said. Saiken looked over at the Sanbai. Are you blushing? He asked in confusion and slight surprise. He shook his head rapidly. No, I'm a turtle. How could I blush? You sound like you enjoy your job, Naruto said to Gianna. She shrugged her shoulders. I wanted to be a cop or CSCC, but my family had bills. I needed the money a corporate job brought in. Besides, in this job, you don't see things that make it hard to sleep at night. White-collar crime is nice and clean. She eyed the both of them as she spoke. The blonde, having once literally waded through a pool of blood during the war, didn't have any kind of a rebuttal to that. Cammy knows that he didn't exactly sleep deeply like he had when he was a kid. There was a kunai beneath his pillow, and one notable sound was enough to snap him awake. The only thing he could think of saying in defense of his line of work was, "It must get boring sometimes." Sometimes, but the times it's interesting is enough to make me stick around. Hell, at least this time I didn't have to wear heels and a dress. That's a shame. You looked good in heels and a dress. Flatterer, she said with a smirk. He smiled back. I call it like I see it. Well, it's been interesting talking to you, but I've got to get going. She started to walk away from the table. See you boys around. Actually, hang on. I got a question for you. She looked at him, the light of the planet's sun framing her outlines. Fire away. The new Biju album, are you in it? Sun barked out in laughter. 2 in 1 day, you're on a roll here. What do you think? He asked her. She rolled her eyes in exasperation. You shinobi, you always have to be so mysterious about everything. She obviously doesn't know a whole lot about shinobi. They tended to be more talkative than the public would like to think. Well, if she wanted it to go like that, then how could he deny her the pleasure? Perhaps not, he remarked. It all depends. You still haven't answered my question. I know. I'll leave it up to you to answer it. Whatever. Bye now. With a conscious effort, she turned around and walked away. That is an interesting woman, Gurus declared as she walked away. A little bit, Naruto conceded. But a bit relaxed for me. I'm not surprised, since you slept with the pirate queen of Omega. He stood up from the chair he was in. What now? I've got something for you to do. How good are you at hacking security and server nodes? I know how to hack them. He felt a little insulted that the commander had to ask that kind of question. Sure, he was nowhere near Tali's level, but he could hold his own. He had proven that for some time now. Alright, go and do that. Once you download the information, you upload it to Liara. Don't argue, he said before the Turian could even protest. You're the one who didn't want to see Liara, so you get to do this instead. Just help her out, okay? He grumbled but acknowledged it with a fine. Good to hear. Gurus didn't say anything to that, instead standing up and walking away to find the security and nodes. What do we do now? Grunt asked him. Now we check with the rest of the team. He reached up to the calm Jacob. How's the shopping trip going? It's coming along well, Jacob replied. We've found some mods and upgrades for the weapons and armor sets on board. We've also found some possible mods for the ship. But there is going to be a slight problem getting back to the Normandy. Don't tell me you guys are locked up because you didn't have the cash on hand to pay for this. I'm not busting you out if you are. Why would you say that? Coco asked in a slightly puzzled voice. It had something to do with that Yamanaka woman, a shopping day, and short fuses because of the war. Leave it at that, Kurama told him. Normally he would have said it in a voice that was tinged with both sarcasm and amusement at what had happened. But this time he said it somberly, like what happened hadn't really been that funny. That's because it hadn't. We don't need you to bust us out even if we were in the slammer, Zaid declared over the comm. We could just bust out ourselves. Naruto took a moment to figure out those words and sighed a little in relief. So you're not in jail? No, Jacob answered. But we are currently tied up in a matter regarding the police, Commander, shouted Miranda, coming into the conversation like a bull rampaging onto a field. He winced visibly, which got Grunt's attention. Nice to hear from you, Miranda, he said. Could you please not shout in my ear? There's no time for that. I need your help. He turned serious. What happened? It's Ruko. She's taken my sister and is on the run from Eclipse. Eric, Musashi, and I are in pursuit, but we've lost them. It should only go to show just how weird and unpredictable Naruto Uzumaki's life was that he didn't bother to ask the obvious questions. Instead, he asked, Where are you? Move your ass, bitch! Ruko shouted at the cheerleader light, shoving her down a corridor whilst shooting at the mercs trying to follow them. She had managed to grab the cheerleader light from the Eclipse mercs just as they were putting her on board a shuttle, and now they were running for their lives. Oriana could only flinch and duck her head at the sounds of gunfire. She was deathly afraid of what was happening. The only thing she could think of doing was just following what the blonde woman was telling her to do and run for her life. The corridor they were running was coming to an end, splitting off into 2 different directions. She knew that going to the left would put her in a public space. If there were enough people there, she could hide and disappear. She started to veer off that way, only to get a vice-like grip on her shoulder. "What the fuck are you thinking?" the woman growled. "That I want to get away from you," she thought. But out loud she said something different. "If we go this way, we could lose them in the crowd." "Never gonna happen. I'm willing to bet that they've got snipers waiting for us that way. Besides, Eclipse isn't above a little bit of rioting." A bullet whizzed past their heads, hitting the wall. "We need to find some place to bunker down in." "No, I need to get back to my parents." She wasn't sure why Eclipse had come to her home and told her parents that there was someone who wanted to see them, and it required an armed escort. But everything was fine until this crazy blonde appeared out of nowhere, grabbed her, and took off. They ran towards the right, banking at the actual turn. The woman flared her biotic, were they red, and threw it behind them. She didn't look back to see if it struck or not. She just kept pushing Oriana forward. They came to the door at the end of the corridor, and she was shoved through as soon as it opened. They were in a business area. Oriana could see that much from the initial look. But it looked deserted and empty. It looked clean, like the rest of Ilium did, but there was not even a Volus in sight. All the usual signs that proclaimed businesses were turned off. This was a strange place for a planet that never seemed to stop. As she looked around and took everything in, she noticed a building larger than the rest at the far back of the area. It looked big enough that they could hide in there, and she could sneak away when she had the chance. "We can hide in there," she told the blonde woman, pointing at the building. "All right, go," she thundered, pushing her that way. The door to the building was left unlocked, so they got in easily. There was a faint blue light on the ceiling, giving them an idea of what was inside, which was a lot of crates and packs. "Don't just stand there, keep moving," the blonde ordered her. They walked into the building until they passed a large crate that could hide them both from the sight of the door. She pushed Oriana behind it and followed her. "All right, we should be safe now," she declared, leaning against the crate. Oriana considered leaving her and trying to sneak back to the safety of Eclipse until she saw something leaking out from beneath her shirt. "You're bleeding!" she cried in horror. The woman looked down at where the bleeding was coming from. "Shit, guess I am." She sounded annoyed at the idea, but she wasn't panicking. How could she not be panicking? She had been shot. She had to be treated. "Do you have any Medigel? I can apply it for you to stop the bleeding." "I'll be fine." "You're not fine, you're bleeding." She looked at her in a funny way, like she wasn't supposed to be talking like that. "It didn't anything necessary. I'll be fine." "But you're bleeding. You can't just leave it like that." "So fix it." Those 3 words stopped her cold and made her nervous. A wave of apprehension went down her back as she looked at the blood. "Fix it?" she repeated, trying not to look at the blood and lose what food she had in her stomach. "Yeah, fix it." Her eyes found the blood and she felt sick. "Don't throw up, don't throw up, don't throw up," she chanted to herself over and over. But it wasn't enough. "I can't." She shook her head rapidly and then looked away. The blonde scoffed. "You're supposed to be the cheerleader's sister? I'm starting to have my doubts." "Sister?" she repeated, confused. "I don't have a sister." "Yeah, you fucking do. You think I'm dragging you around for the hell of it?" Yes?" she replied, still very confused. That was exactly what she had been thinking. "Sorry, kid. But you ain't important to the galaxy." She looked sharply to the left, but she didn't raise her weapon. Oriana heard the faint sound of something ringing. "Seriously, they put that on the fucking comm?" "I'm sorry?" "Not talking to you, just sit there and shut up." She pointed over at a spot where she could be easily seen. She wanted to protest or even ask why, but the woman just glared at her. So she just sat down where she told to. Once Ruko was sure the cheerleader light was properly sitting where she told to sit, she answered the comm. "Yeah, what? Where are you?" Naruto asked. "Hey there, bro," she said, trying to sound like absolutely nothing was wrong. Her attempt at being lighthearted met with a pained hiss. "Was that a hiss of pain? Were you shot, Ruko?" he demanded. "Yeah, I was." "Don't get your panties in a wad. It was their job to get shot at. Besides, she wasn't hit anywhere important." "Where are you?" A warehouse," she answered, looking around the place. There was nothing but crates and packs. In the faint blue light, she could see just enough of them to know they were there. Where is it? I have no fucking idea. I just grabbed and ran. I didn't pay attention to the details. There was an irritated sigh on the other end. He must be getting annoyed. Well, it wasn't her problem. Alright, tell me what happened from the top. She started talking right away, knowing that he would want the details. Well, we went to go see the cheerleader's contact to check in, and she was told her that dear old daddy found out about her sister and was sending the eclipse after her. While the cheerleader was trying to check in with a friend or something, I just went and found where the biggest group of eclipse mercs were gathering on Ilium and worked my way back from there. Didn't take me long to find the sister right in the middle of an eclipse group, so I killed the group and grabbed her. Eclipse didn't really like it when I did that, and so they decided to chase after me. Someone started shooting, then someone threw some biotics, and the next thing I know, I'm trying to fight while running away at the same time. It's fucking exhausting. Are you alright? What are you? My mother? She asked with a sarcastic bite. She got a flash of a red-haired woman who would probably scold her before hugging her tightly. She brushed it off and focused on the conversation. No, I'm your brother. Now are you alright? Being snarky and sarcastic wouldn't do anything to help now. So she matched his seriousness. I'm relatively fine. I figure the cheerleader light and I will just hold down the fort here until someone finds us. Cheerleader light? It's what I'm calling the girl. Does she have a name? Hell if I know, I'm sticking with cheerleader light. It was an apt description, especially since she knew that the sister couldn't handle a little bit of blood. She had looked like she was going to throw up at the mere sight of it. Alright, just stay where you are. Everyone is trying to find you. With any luck, we'll get to you before Eclipse does. She scoffed at that. We don't need luck, it's a natural thing for us. Just stay there, he ordered. By the way, you're the one who's going to have to deal with Miranda when all of this is done. When the calm went dead, she looked back at the cheerleader light, who was looking at her very nervously. Would you relax already? You look like I'm about to shoot you. AR, aren't you? She asked, her voice squeaking. No, I'm trying to save your ass. Sheesh, how are you the cheerleader's sister? You are nothing alike. Who are you talking about? Ruka looked at her with a disbelieving eye. She seemed to be genuinely confused. Fuck it, I'm not going to be the one. No, the one who would be spilling the beans would be the cheerleader herself. She might be a bit of an asshole, but she wasn't that big of one. When the cheerleader light stood up and started walking away, she stood up too. Hey, where are you going? She demanded. The bathroom? The girl offered weakly from where she stood next to one of the packs. Nice try. Get back over here now. I don't want to go chasing after you just to save your ass. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked in a trembling voice. What did I ever do to you? The look on her face was genuine. She was actually afraid of what was happening to her. The irritation Ruko felt started to drain away and she lowered her gun. Look, I'm doing you a favor. Your sister was working herself into a panic over you when she learned what was happening. But nothing was happening, she protested, wiping the tears off her face. Guess she's got something of a spine in there somewhere, the blonde thought, silently approving of how quickly she stopped crying. Why do you think the Eclipse were escorting you? I don't know. They just told my parents that someone wanted to see us, someone who had been looking for us for some time now. And that didn't warn you to get out while you could? If she had heard those words, she would have been out the back door, or window, she wasn't picky, without missing a beat. But the cheerleader light only looked confused. They didn't make us do anything and they were quite polite. Of course they were. The sarcasm was so thick it could have been used as paint. The cheerleader light looked like she wanted to say something in protest, but then she looked over at the pack beside her, and her eyes widened in horror. Oh no, she whispered in a scared voice again. What's got your panties in a twist now? Ruko asked with an exasperated voice, wincing a little at the pain in her side. She pointed at the pack with a trembling finger. This is a pack of red sand. So are the others. Her finger pointed at the other packs next to it. The blonde got up and walked over to look at the pack herself. There was a warning label telling the reader what the contents were. She looked up and out at the warehouse, seeing more and more packs. Her first thought was they sell in bulk now. But when she noticed the seal on the packs, her second thought was oh shit. She raised her gun and started looking around the place for any danger. What is it? The girl asked her. This isn't just a warehouse. This is an Eclipse warehouse. She could see the letter E inside the sun relatively easy on the packs. We need to go. But, I ain't arguing with you on this. We need to go. She activated the comm while reaching out to grab her by the arm. Anybody out there? She called into the comm. I am, answered a cool and subtly arrogant Asari voice. Ruko came to a complete stop and cursed herself. In her rush to reach out, she accidentally turned the comm on to all frequencies. Anyone could be listening in on her now. Who is this? She asked. The person who was in charge of that little escort you interrupted. I would like my package back now. The way she spoke, she was used to being obeyed the first time she gave an order. That, of course, gave the blonde an incentive to say otherwise. Fuck you. She ain't going anywhere with you. That's hardly your choice now. We'll be coming in now. Fight or don't fight, it really doesn't matter to me. Her voice disappeared and Ruko took that moment to limit the comm to more secure channels. Guys, if you're listening, we're about to have company. Some help might be needed here. Her reply came in both good news and bad news. The good news was that she got a reply. The bad news was that it was the cheerleader. What's happening? She demanded. Were you not listening? I just said we're about to have company. It was hard to keep the sarcasm in her voice to what she thought was a reasonable level, but she tried. Where are you? An Eclipse warehouse. Do you have any idea how many there are on Ilium? She waited a beat before continuing. Not kidding here. That might actually help you narrow down where I am. Just stay there, we're on our way. Her voice became lower and more dangerous. Keep her alive. Keep her safe. The call ended before Ruko could say anything. Should go without fucking saying, she groused. Pulling her hand away from the comm, she looked over at the sister. Alright, let's get moving. At that point, several things happened at the same time. The back doors burst open to reveal Eclipse mercs who swarmed in. The front door broke open and the Eclipse mercs came running in, and the glass ceiling shattered open, allowing a single Asari to drop down beside the two of them. Normally, Ruko wouldn't have thought anything of a single Asari. But she saw the get-up and recognized enough of it to realize that this Asari was not any normal Asari, she was a Justicar. Oh fuck. Ruko had a close encounter with a Justicar once. The only reason she was still alive was because she had moved faster than anyone else and got out first. Please let her be on our side. The Eclipse mercs were just as nervous as she was about the Justicar. They were all looking at one another with uncertain eyes when she spoke. I have no wish to fight you unless I must, she said, her voice at a such cool and calm level, it was almost disturbing. I have only come to find the artifact you smuggled off of Ilium. Tell me that and I will let you be. Who would smuggle an artifact off planet? One of the mercs from the back demanded. Shut up, now, an Asari in Eclipse armor in the front ordered. Apparently, she was the leader. The Justicar turned her attention to her. It seems you have the information I need. Tell me which ship you put her on. She didn't look very impressed by she said. Look, what's happening doesn't concern you and you're outnumbered. Get out of here and you'll get your answers. Ruko felt that was the time to speak up. You shoot at me and the kid, you know that the Justicar will fall on our side of the argument. Which means you'll be making your own graves. So why don't you just let the two of us go? And she heard the bark of a gun being fired behind and turned to face the shooter. She didn't get halfway before feeling a sharp pain on her lower side that was quickly followed by a twin. She stopped, tried to look down at the pain, and silently kicked herself for not lowering the shields that far down. That kicking quickly turned to rage. She flared her red biotics, washing the warehouse with its light, and faced the Eclipse shooter. Did you just shoot me in the ass? Codex entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance Heroes, a term originally used to describe characters of island kingdoms of Earth's mythologies. The heroes emerged in current history as the strongest force of the kingdoms. The original hero, name lost to history, was a soldier in the Great Aal's army during his War of Unification. During the Battle of the Titan's Valley, it is said the Great Aal's horse was killed and sent crashing down. The loss of sight of their leader disheartened his men as it would seem that the enemy had reached him. As the Great Aal lay on the ground dazed, the enemy army approached him, intent on fulfilling his army's fear. But the original hero ran to his leader's side and held off the attackers with only his shield and spear. When the Great Aal recovered and stood back up, he joined the soldier in driving off the enemy. As they fought, the soldier shouted back to the army, "Your emperor stands." To his side. The cries spread through the army, and soon the great owl was back in safety. The attack was pressed, and the Soldier led it. History would say that as the Soldier attacked the enemy army, the great owl ordered, "Rally to that hero. He will lead us to victory." After they took the valley, the great owl honored the soldier above all others. He was given the position of becoming the great owl's personal guard, a position he would take and hold for the rest of his life, serving not just the soon-to-be crowned emperor of the island kingdoms, but also his son, Darius. But it was only that in Darius's reign that the founding of the order began, requested by the emperor. To qualify to be a hero, there are several requirements. The first is that one must be a native to the island kingdoms, and the second that they have a military service of no less than 6 years. They must achieve peak physical conditioning and also pass intelligence tests. Failure to pass either of these requirements means an automatic failure. The training is hard and brutal, and while trainees are allowed to drop out of their own free will, those who do are looked down harder than those who failed. If one does manage to succeed and become a hero, they are sorted into one of two sections, the spears and the shields. The shields are the more defensive of the two, more focused on protecting the emperor, while the spears are more aggressive-oriented, finding the emperor's enemies and ending them. Because of this arrangement, the shields are the more obvious of the two, easily recognizable by their chakra steel armored outfits and their Omni-Tool's larger tower shields. Although their duty is to the emperor of the island kingdoms, the heroes are also known for being loaned out to police outfits on colony planets belonging to the Alliance. However, it is usually shields that are loaned since they are able to do more for the police. Chapter 45. This was not my fault. Location: Ilium. Miranda walked up quietly beside Naruto and Ruko. They were on one of Nos Astra's terraces, being a part of the crowd moving around them but not actually moving themselves. No sign of eclipse, she told them both. It looks like we're clear. Good, Ruko said, feeling a little tired and sore all over, and not even in the good way. There was an itch on her shoulder from where she got patched up that she was dying to scratch, even when she was told not to. 1 shootout per day is my quota. There wouldn't been a shootout if you hadn't grabbed her like that and led the mercs on a chase through the city and getting lost, she retorted, turning on the woman with the anger that only comes from an older sibling worrying about the younger. Have you not been paying attention? There would have been a shootout regardless of what happened. That's just a part of being on this team. At least this way we kept the causalities down to just eclipse mercs. If anything, you should be thanking me. She might have helped destroy a warehouse full of red sand alongside a Justicar until the rest of her team showed up and pretty much ended the fight, but thanks would have been nice all the same. Maybe we should just be glad that Miranda's sister and her adopted family were able to come out of this all in one piece, Naruto suggested before the argument could actually start going. He kept his gaze forward, not looking at either of them. They looked forward too. Far enough to be out of reach but still close enough to be seen was Oriana and her family. They were talking amongst themselves, no doubt going over what had happened to them in the past few hours. But despite that, Oriana looked glad and happy to be amongst her foster parents again, and so did they. There she is, Miranda declared, looking at her little sister. She's safe, with her family. She fell silent, just looking at her. Her father's voice whispered behind her ear, saying those 2 words over and over. It kept her in place, not daring to step forward. Ruko, as usual, wouldn't have any of it. You should go talk to her, she told the brunette simply. She looked at the blonde with a mixture of surprise and wondering if she had lost her mind. But then she lost the look and shook her head. No, we should go. Ruko grabbed her tightly by the arm, stopping her from even trying to leave. Listen up, cheerleader. I did not get my ass shot protecting your baby sister just so you could wuss out at the last minute. Now get over there and talk to her. Miranda stood there, taking in her words. She saw how serious the blonde was. Every inch of her being and body yelled not to listen her, to turn back and walk away from Oriana. But Ruko's grip was strong, steady, and oddly enough, reassuring. She took a deep breath, placed one foot forward, and then did the same with the other. She did it again and again until she realized that she was halfway there. Both Naruto and Ruko watched her walk the distance to her sister. They could both tell that she was nervous as all hell doing it, but she still kept moving forward until she stood behind her sister. Oriana turned around to look at her, and her eyes widened in surprise. Naruto saw lips were moving but was too far to know what they were saying. Plus, he figured that this was something best kept private. So instead, he spoke quietly to Ruko. All right, give me the details. Details? Repeated his sister. Yeah, details. Miranda loves a good explanation, and I know you've got ears. You know a few details about the sister, so spill. All I know is that the cheerleader light. She has a name, Ruko. He stopped her before she could actually start. I know that. She just liked using the words cheerleader light. It was much more fun that way. Then use it. His voice was firm and would have no opposition. Try as she might have, she couldn't get past him when he used that voice on her. Fine, she said with an irritated huff. Oriana was made the same way the cheerleader was. I ain't calling her Miranda, she told him before he could say anything back. One side of his lips quirked up into what was the beginnings of a smirk. I didn't say anything about her. Keep going. Anyway, the cheerleader found out about Oriana, so she grabbed her and went on the run from Daddy Dearest. When she got into contact with the Akatsuki, she hid Oriana away with the foster family, those guys. She gestured at Oriana's parents, who were talking to Miranda just like their daughter, with a dismissive shrug of her shoulder. That's it. Thank you. He continued to watch the sisters talk with each other, their postures becoming more relaxed as they spoke and the smiles coming easier to their lips. For a moment, he wondered if this was what Sasuke's and Itachi's relationship would like if the latter hadn't helped massacre his own clan. Ruko snorted quietly in derision. Saps, she proclaimed as she watched the family. Naruto looked at her out of the corner of his eye. You disapprove of them finally getting to know one another? He asked her. Hey, I've never had a family, so I've never saw the point of all that kind of crap. It's just bullshit in the end. If you don't have family, what do you call me? She didn't answer right away. She tried to come up with something, but she couldn't find the right words. He smirked more fully now. He had her. I never had a family either, Ruko. Not in the usual sense. So I made my own family. You're doing the same. Yeah, right, she said mockingly. You are. He could see it in how she acted around the rest of the team and the ship's crew, hitting on them or freaking them out less and actually talking to them. It was a nice change from what he heard from the crew. She knew what he was implying, and it felt uncomfortable. Would you mind changing the subject? We've got nothing to talk about with that. You sure? He asked innocently. Yes. Her voice sounded like a steel trap snapping shut on the subject. While he could have easily ignored the request, he chose to honor it and switched to something that she probably wouldn't expect right away. So, was what I heard true? Someone shot you in the ass? She flashed him a glare, albeit tinted with red cheeks. If you're planning on looking, I ain't dropping true out here. His smirk turned into a grin. So you'll gladly do it on the ship? The red on her cheeks got brighter. I will throw you over the edge with my biotics. Don't think I won't. He held his hands up in slight surrender. Easy, Ruko, he told her. I was looking for a yes or no answer. You're the one who got defensive. It was fun teasing her like a brother should, though. Besides, the only one who will be looking at your ass anytime soon is Dr. Chukwas. I'm fine. I put some Medigel on the wounds. She's still looking at them. What? Are you going to make me go to her office? Even though her voice took on a challenging tone, he could see the slight fear trembling behind the bravado. Like his student, his sister was afraid of the medical doctor aboard the Normandy. And having been in that position himself, only with different doctors, he could find amusement in her reactions. I'm not going to do anything. She's going to find out somehow and will tell you to come to her office. If you refuse, she will find you and make you come. It's better to save yourself the trouble and go to her yourself. I'm fine. Suit yourself. I'm just trying to help out my sister. You don't need to do that. I'm capable of handling myself. But even though she said those words, she felt a wave of gratitude towards him. When she was near him, she felt safe. It was how she was able to relax and stay calm in the warehouse when it began to look like she and the Justica would be overwhelmed. She just knew that he would be coming through the door. Lo and behold, he did, with guns blazing and hitting everything in sight. He didn't believe her for 1 second. If she thought that she could take care of herself and not needed anyone, she would have left the Normandy as soon as she could have. But she was still with them. Miranda's coming back, he noted, watching the brunette give her sister one last hug before walking back to them. Ruko gave her one long look when she reached them. Everything good? She asked. Yes. Good. Then let's get out of here. We've got places to be, don't we? That we do, Naruto agreed. They all turned and left the terrace through a nearby door. But once they were through, Miranda turned to Ruko and slugged her hard in the shoulder. What the hell, bitch? The blonde biotic demanded in an angry voice. That was for hitting on my sister, she said with a scowl. She had taken note that the corridor they were in was pretty much empty, so this could stay private for some time. What? I didn't hit your sister. She might have been tempted at times, but she never did. Naruto watched the two of them, a little surprised that Miranda did such a thing. But when he heard her words, he relaxed a little. I don't think she meant that kind of hitting, Ruko, he told his sister. You flirted with her. Miranda growled, still very annoyed. When she heard that, disbelief became evident on her face, and she sneered at the brunette. I didn't do that kind of hitting either. She was too busy trying to make sure that the girl didn't die on her while they were under fire. Have you finally lost it, cheerleader? You weren't hitting on her? No. Then why did she ask me to say thanks to the terrifying blonde who was actually kind of hot? Her voice didn't raise a decimal higher, but she managed to make fill the entire corridor. Even though the description surprised Ruko a little, she had an answer for Miranda. Oh, I don't know. How about I was trying to make sure she didn't end up dead? Maybe that's why. There was no flirting. There wasn't time with all the bullets being shot at us. She jutted out her chin in a silent challenge. The brunette didn't reply to it. Instead, she kept on walking. Naruto caught up to her and leaned into her ear. Jealous that your sister made a move on a woman you've known for months but she only met for the first time? He whispered with a grin on his face. She didn't answer him, choosing to keep moving. Clearly he doesn't know about the shower, she thought to herself. Looks like those codes he insisted on worked. Thinking about that day brought back the associated memories. It was only after she walked out the bathroom she had realized just how close she had been to Ruko. She had never realized that she was taller than the blonde by a few inches until then. It was also the first time she found herself actually looking at Ruko's tattoos. They were surprisingly interesting. And the way her hair plastered itself to her head when wet. Wait, what am I doing? Miranda asked herself. She was thinking about Ruko like that when she was supposed to be angry at her. What the hell? Where did that come from? She pushed it aside, refusing to think about it, and hoping she wasn't blushing. Naruto watched her go with an amused look. It was rare to see Miranda get so flustered. You enjoy that way too much, Matatabi told him with chastisement. It's rare to get a reaction like that out of her. Let me have my fun. It could come back to bite you in the ass. Kurama just snorted. He'll run fast enough to escape the biting. Trust me, I've seen it. What's the matter with her? Ruko asked as she walked up beside him, watching Miranda leave just like him. She's jealous, that's all, he told her. Jealous of what? She asked with agitated confusion. More like of whom? And it would be you. Me? Yes, you, he told her. The two of you really need to talk about all this. There is nothing to talk about. The two of them didn't like each other. That was it, confusing moments in the shower aside. She's jealous of you because she thought that her sister made a move on you via her. I'd say there's something that needs to be talked about. Now either you guys take care of it yourself or I make you take care of it. She scoffed at that while they passed through another door. And how exactly do you plan on making us figure it out? The same way I had Liara and Maya figure out what they were. If it worked once, then surely it would work twice. You do remember what that led to, right? Shikaka asked him. Yes, of course I do. He had been close by when he heard the results. Practically everyone in hearing range heard the results. Okay, just making sure. But even as he said those words, the Tanuki had a smug grin on his face. The other Biju just groaned and sent him dirty looks. They knew what exactly he was thinking of, since he had been responsible for the first time around. They were crossing their way through another terrace when Geras joined them. Hey, he said to the blondes casually. I listened in on the conversations about the sister. Did you guys have fun? Ruko got shot in the ass, Naruto said before she could say anything. So instead, she punched him in the shoulder. You don't need to tell him that. He shrugged his shoulders. Better from me than someone else, don't you think? She growled but didn't say anything. You really got shot in the ass? Geras asked her. He had to wonder just what were the odds of that happening. They had to be absurdly high. Yeah, I did. Move on, she ordered, swinging her head to glare at him. He raised his talons in surrender. No problem doing that here. He had no wish of wanting to get on her bad side. He saw enough of that when she slung her biotics around like a sledgehammer. How things go with Liara? Naruto asked him, sidestepping a pair of Asari as he walked. They passed him a look that suggested things, but he ignored it. He had gotten a lot of looks like that even before he got sealed up, and he ignored them all. Yes, because you're an idiot, Kurama told him. Started feeling like a treasure hunt about 5 minutes in, the Turian said with a slight annoyed growl. Only this had exercise involved in it. You're not opposed to exercise, Gurus. I've seen your push-up record. He had posted it in the mess so everyone could see it, and who came in behind him. It sparked a push-up contest and he won. A lot of the crew complained about sore arms for days afterwards. That's different. I like exercise for keeping myself healthy and fit. I don't like it as a source of entertainment for others. You think that Liara had you running around for kicks? That didn't sound like Liara, not even the information broker. She was not a person who was amused by having people run around like rabbits searching for the carrot at the end of the road. It seemed like Gurus felt the same way. Not her, but the people around who saw me sprinting like a madman. What she wanted me to hack into, and what she wanted to download were not right next to each other. Usually they were on the other end of the room or area or whatever. Don't be a wuss, Ruko told him. Running never killed anyone. Actually, it nearly did to Rock Lee, Naruto mused, mostly to himself as a memory started to come back to him. Naruto, focus, Saiken said sharply. He stopped himself at the Rokubi's voice. Thanks. No one gives a shit about that, his sister told him with a dismissive roll of her eyes. Stay in the present. Not rudely as her, but ditto, Gurus added, nodding in agreement. I get it. He didn't want to sound like an old person who would rather think about the old days than focus on what was happening right in front of him. Are you kidding? Shikaka asked him with a wide smirk on his face. Shut up, he ordered. To Gurus, he said, continue. I don't have a problem running across a room, if it was empty and I had a clear line of sight on the target, the Turian told Ruko. It's a little different when the room is crowded, and I don't have that clear line. That's when you start shoving people out of the way. Duh, she told him, making it sound like it was the most obvious thing in the world. A Batarian shoved past her with a hard shoulder and glared at her like she was the one who did something wrong. She turned her head back and fixed him with the same kind of glare, and placed her hand on her pistol. He got the silent message and kept on walking. Gurus didn't get angry or insulted at her remark. He chose to go with sarcasm. Forgive me, Ruko. I sometimes forget to remind that not everyone in the galaxy has biotic power. Why, just take a look at your brother. Don't use me as an example, that's not fair, the blonde interjected. In any case, I'm assuming you succeeded in getting Liara what she wanted? Yeah, and then she wanted me to do something else for her. Oh, and she was surprised to get me. She thought that she was going to get you, he pointed out to him. She'll live. What did she want? She wanted me to help her track down someone working for the Shadow Broker. Someone called the Observer. That had me running all over Ilium again, he grumbled as they came to another door and waited for it to open. Per baby, Ruko said mockingly. Watch it. Or what? She challenged with a grin. Knock it off, you two, Naruto told them both. Keep talking, Gurus. He did so without missing a beat. Liara had me looking for deleted record logs so I could try and restore them. She had where they were deleted, so that part was taken care of. I did the necessary digging and found some of the logs. He stepped behind Naruto to let a large group pass them so he wouldn't get knocked over like a log to a stampede. So the logs revealed who the Observer was, right? Not really. Each one described a completely different kind of person. Every time I was able to recover one, I couldn't help but think that someone had planted them. By the time I recovered them all and looked them over, I was all but certain. So, I contacted Liara and asked who it was that gave her the information about where the logs could be recalled. What did she say? She didn't. She just called her assistant into her office. His curiosity was evident in how he finished talking. The blonde shinobi realized what that meant instantly. He smiled in satisfaction, puzzling the other two. There's no need to worry, Gurus. Liara found out who the Observer was. And I'd be willing to be that she took care of it. The Turian looked at him uncertainly. Are you sure about that? He couldn't help but ask. Of course, I'm sure. Liara's a smart girl and perfectly capable of handling herself. You know that. She had done that while she was with the team with the first Normandy. If she hadn't, she wouldn't have been on the ship. I do know that, but the Shadow Broker isn't something to scoff at. And if he's nothing to scoff, then his agents wouldn't be either, he pointed out. Trust me, I know. How would you know? Ruko asked him. I've run into a couple of them whilst on Omega. They were no laughing matter. If he and his team hadn't been on their toes and paid attention, there was a very good chance that they could have been outed by those agents and gotten entirely slaughtered. Naruto eyed him while they brushed past the Turian with armed guards, not sparing him a second look no matter how self-important he thought he was. You think that we should go check on Liara? He didn't ask it as a question since he pretty much already knew the answer. Gurus knew the same thing, which was why he didn't answer with a yes or a no, choosing to say, it never hurts to do that. All right, fair point, he conceded, folding his fingers together in that familiar seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone appeared in a plume of smoke, shocking no one around them, shockingly enough. With no instructions, it left them and walked in the direction of Liara's office. Are you happy now? Ruko asked the Turian. Yes, I am. Good. The rest of the walk to the ship was done in silence. That is, until they reached the walkway leading to the ship itself. That was where they saw the Justicar standing off to the side, staring out at the city in front of her. Who's that? Gurus asked. Oh shit, Ruko said in a voice full of surprise and fear. Then she did a very odd thing, she hid behind Naruto. The Turian looked over at her with a bemused look of small confusion. What are you doing? Hiding, she snapped at him while trying to keep her voice quiet. Why? She was never one to hide from any kind of threat. If anything, she had to be held back so she didn't charge in recklessly. But now she was hiding? It didn't really make sense to him. That's a Justicar. Oh. Now her hiding made a little more sense. Even he got a small sense of fear whenever a Justicar looked at him in that way they did, measuring a person up for all they had done wrong and making a choice to kill them or not. But that still didn't explain why Ruko was hiding. She didn't back down from anything. Well, that's proven false now, he thought to himself. Naruto didn't seem as nervous as his sister was. In fact, he didn't seem nervous at all. He walked up to the Justicar with an easy grin on his face, leaving his sister behind. What are you doing? She hissed at him. Hey there, Samara, he greeted the Justicar with a wave. How's life been? Behind him, both the blonde and the Turian looked at him with gaped jaws. The Justicar turned her head to look at him. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, making his name sound more formal than he thought it should be. Have you come to test your abilities against mine once more? Didn't the Alliance and the Asari Republics forbid us from doing that ever again? He asked, albeit with a good-humored smile. He was fairly certain that they had, even when there were no hostile feelings between the two of them. I believe that was only on Thesha itself. We would be fine here. She said it with such a straight face he knew that she wasn't joking. Maybe, but we probably shouldn't. Odds are we'd end up wrecking the city and the planet if we did it. She looked back out at the city once more, falling silent again. Is she actually considering it? Chome asked. I think she is, Saiken said. That's not good, Kurama declared. You have a point, Samara finally said, looking back at him. Thanks. He had to admit, even when she was considering a spar that could wreck an entire city, Samara cut a serene appearance. He put it down to the look of calm on her face. It was a look that silently said that things would be alright and there was no need to panic. Of course, the other part was that her bodysuit hid none of her curves or her muscles. She was a woman who was as beautiful as she was deadly. Naruto? Called Gurus from behind him. He looked back at the two of them. What are you two doing just standing there? He asked them. They looked like they were trying to become with the scenery. His sister kept looking nervously at Samara. Ruko, you know this Justicar? She helped us out. I wouldn't say that's knowing her, Ruko replied, still looking nervous. He knew that Samara helped out in the warehouse. When he had seen her fighting alongside Ruko and protecting Oriana, he breathed a little easier. Just get over here. She's not going to bite. He looked back at the Asari. You've already met my sister Ruko. This is Gurus, he introduced the Turian. Honor to meet you, ma'am, Gurus said with a bow of respect. She acknowledged him with a small incline of her head. Your sister? She said to Naruto, turning her attention back to him. I thought you had been an only child. You've been reading up on me? He asked with a smile. Yes, she said with a straight face. The history books were quite clear on that fact. You were born and your parents died that same night. You have no siblings. Who is she? She asked, looking at Ruko with a hard look. Ruko gulped nervously and looked at her brother for support. It's complicated, and a little bit weird, he told the Justicar. Let's leave it at that. She kept looking at the blonde woman for a second or two longer. Very well, she finally said, turning her gaze away. Ruko breathed a sigh of relief at being dismissed like that. So, Naruto, you've met her before? Geras asked him, looking at the Justicar as he spoke. Yeah, back on Thesha after I woke up, he answered. She helped me get into my spot of trouble in this day and age. That shouldn't be something to be proud of, Gyuki chastised him. Flashback. They had found him an exercise area to get back into proper fighting shape that was a good distance away from any of the Republic, since the Alliance wanted to keep him quiet until they were ready. He had no problems with that. He was more focused on getting back into shape than any kind of publicity. Right now, he was working on remember his fighting stances and katas, and since he was always a practical learner, that meant he was sparring with a clone. It was only one clone because he wanted to go a little slow. It was only his first week of retraining. He couldn't go full force. He figured that out yesterday when he tried creating a Rasengan and was sent clear across the room. Not one of his better moments. They had worked on his simple stuff and were now beginning to move into the advanced stuff. The blows were coming in harder and quicker. But he knew where they were coming from and blocked them like he had been taught. His mind was blank, not worrying about everything that had been crammed into his head. He wasn't worrying about how he was now 2,000 years into the future. He wasn't worrying about how he wasn't on Earth. He wasn't worrying about humanity wasn't alone in the universe. He wasn't worrying about how all the people he had known were now dead. Actually, that wasn't true. A thought did come to him as he pushed a kick away. It was on Hinata and Sakura and how he had left things with them. Did they find happiness? He couldn't help but wonder. Did Kiba and Sasuke marry them? Did they find someone else? Did they? The clone must have seen that he was distracted because the next thing he knew, he was airborne before coming down on the ground. His back became alive and was telling him that he landed hard. You lost focus there, boss, the clone told him, standing over him. I know, he replied, getting back up. He shook it off and faced the clone in a ready stance. Come, let's go again. You can't. You remembered the promise you made with yourself. He stopped, coming out of the stance. Yeah, I remember, he replied with a small growl. If he had lost to one of his clones, it meant an hour of basic training to remember his roots. He dismissed the clone and started doing just that, which meant a long hard run in a short amount of time. In his case, it was the 4-minute mile, 3 times over. He had no trouble starting it off, but towards the end, he began to peter out. That wasn't something he was used to. I am out of shape, he thought to himself as he came to a stop, resting his hands on his knees while he panted. That was a troubling thought. But that just meant he got back into fighting shape. Once his breath was back, he went back to the mat and went through the sets again. The repetition helped him forget the troubling thoughts that got on the ground. You work hard, a cool female's voice said off to the side. He spun around, still in motion of the kata, and ended in an upwards kick. It was pointed at her head, even though she was a good 5 feet away. He was looking at an Asari that would have made both Jiraiya and Killer Bee drool and trail after her. She wore a red bodysuit that highlighted both her curves and her muscles. I have to work hard, he told her, lowering the foot. I need to get back into shape. People want to get into shape. People have to get into shape. People do not need to get into shape, she remarked, her eyes looking him all over. They were not the eyes of someone eyes his body like he was a piece of meat, and they were licking their lips. They were the eyes of someone who saw everything as a potential threat and measured them all for danger. Well, I need to get back into shape, he replied, moving into a 1-2 combo punch. After being out as long as I have been, I don't have a choice about it. You are human. You could not have been out long. Would you call 2,000 years long? He said without thinking about it. Then he froze and then started kicking himself. You idiot, no one is supposed to know that. 2,000 years, she repeated. That is not possible. Even though he could have gone with what she was saying, he didn't like being called a liar to his face, which was probably a bit hypocritical, him being a shinobi and all. It is, he told her. I've been asleep for 2,000 years. To her credit, she didn't argue. Instead, she just asked how? He brought his arms in a guard position. But he kept his gaze focused on her. It's kinda a long story. But maybe we should introduce ourselves first. She kept watching him, apprising him. Yes. That would be the correct thing to do, she finally said with a nod. He lowered his arms and smiled at her. Great. So who are you? He waited for the remark or chastisement from the fox he knew was coming, but then remembered that Kurama was still silent for some reason. It was a little weird and terrifying. If she had anything to say about his manners or approach, she didn't say it. Instead, she simply said, I am Samara, a Justicar. He knew what a Justicar was, having read about them. He was impressed by what he read, and seeing one in the flesh himself was just as impressive. Nice to meet ya, the name's Naruto Uzumaki. I'm a shinobi. She looked at him again. I have heard that name before. You have? He was a little surprised by that. He had assumed that the rest of the galaxy didn't give a care about whom or what the legends on Earth were. Yes, on the lips of shinobi and priests before they die as a prayer. Since he was aware of what a Justicar was, there wasn't really a point in asking whether or not she was the one who killed them. But what was surprising was that second person she mentioned. Priests? He asked. Priests, she repeated. That was just confusing. Why would priests be saying my name? She looked at him again, this time with a look that asked if he was serious or if he truly did not know. If you are Naruto Uzumaki, then surely you know of the Church of the Nine. After all, they consider you to be a god. They what? He asked. Oh, that was just going to be a headache by itself alone. He had a religion? If the guys could see this, they would be laughing. Hell, Sasuke would just smirk and ask how a dobe like him got a religion. As he thought about his friends, the thoughts came flooding in again. No, don't think about them. He looked back at the Justicar, forcing himself to talk a different subject. So, why are you here? I thought I had this place to myself. This is a training area. I am here to train. She didn't make it sound like she was talking to an idiot. She was just stating a fact. Cool. You wanna spar? She considered it for a moment, and then nodded in agreement. I do not see the problem in that. She took a ready stance. Would you like to start, or shall I? Take it away, he told her, moving into a sparring stance instead of a practice one. End flashback. We ended up getting yelled at by the higher-ups for wrecking the place. Naruto finished the story. After that, I was sent to the Everest, and I didn't see Samara here again. Whoa, Gur said, looking at the both of them in complete awe. Shit, fuck, and fire, Ruko swore. The blonde shinobi looked over at the Justicar. So, what brought you to Ilium, Samara? He asked her. I was hunting an artichoke, she answered. The Eclipse mercenaries helped smuggle her off-planet before I could read her. If she could have looked annoyed, that probably would have been the moment. But her face was as calm and neutral as ever. Sorry? He offered. You do not need to apologize. You did not aid the artichoke in fleeing from me. How did you end up in the warehouse? Since I couldn't reach my target, I decided to find out which ship she had left on. My hunt led me to the warehouse, and thus I found myself in that fight. Why did you help me? Ruko asked. One side of her was saying shut up, but the other side desperately wanting to know the answer. The Justicar looked over at her. Once the shot had been fired at you, it had become clear that they were the aggressors and that you were only trying to protect that human girl. Thus, siding with you was the just thing to do. So you're basically saying that because I got shot in the ass, you chose to help us instead of them? She felt completely and utterly embarrassed. That had to be the reason. She didn't see any other way how it could be. If the cheerleader learned about this, she was never going to hear the end of it. Yes. Although I will admit that it would be the first time that was ever the case. Her face remained neutral as she spoke, but the blonde could have sworn that her lips tugged faintly upward. If it was anyone else, that would have gotten her a whole lot of lip and biotics too. But since this was a Justicar, she chose to keep her mouth shut. Thanks for the help, Naruto told the Justicar. It was needed. You are welcome. But I did not come here for a casual greeting. I have come for to offer my services to you. That made the two humans and Turian freeze in place. They looked at each other, trying to figure out if they had heard her right. It sounded like they had all heard the same thing. The Justicar was offering to help them. But while that sounded good and all, Naruto's shinobi-trained instincts were telling him to get more details. As a warrior? He asked her. While I would gladly offer that too, I was offering my services as a teacher, she explained. Oh. A teacher of what? He asked curiously. Biotics, she answered, looking right at Ruko. Why are you looking at me like that? She asked, feeling defensive for some weird reason. You are in sore need of training. What? No, I'm not. The Justicar's face did not change expression. What I have seen would say otherwise. That just made her more defensive, angry too. Her ability to mouth off came back, and it came back hard. Look, lady, I know how to handle myself. I've been doing that since day one. No one taught me how to use my biotics, I did that myself. I don't need to learn anything else, and I certainly don't need to learn it from a holier-than-thou Asari bitch, got it? Samara didn't look angry or annoyed or even exasperated by what she had heard. That is one tough woman, Shikaka remarked with an impressed voice. What else would you expect from the woman who threw down with Naruto and lived to talk about it? Gyuki asked him. To be fair, they were only sparring, Saiken pointed out. We don't know if she could have survived if they had fought for real. We don't know if he could have survived, Kurama said with disinterest. If you are done? Said Samara impassively. Ruko just got more irritated. You. She's done, Naruto said, cutting her off before she could even start. Hey! She protested. She was by no means done. He looked at her once. You're done, he told her, his eyes warning her to not say another word. She took the hint and stayed silent, letting him focus back on the Justicar. Are you sure you want to do this, Samara? Isn't that Artikyakshi chasing important? Yes, but I was taught to never someone who is in need of guidance walk away. To do so would be unjust to them, she answered. My hunt can be kept in view so long as I track my target. And you do really think that Ruko needs the help? Hey, standing right here, his sister said with an irritated huff of air. Don't talk about me like I'm not here. Sorry, he told her while still keeping his eyes on Samara. But the question is still a valid one. Yes, she needs the help, the Justicar told him. Her form is non-existent, she tires too easily, and she wields her power like it is a club to hit things. Well, pardon me for not being born in Asari, Ruko snapped at her. Everyone knew that Asari knew biotics like humans knew chakra. To see an Asari wield her biotics was like watching a piece of moving art. Not that she's seen any moving pieces of art. Way too wimpy for her. Whatever your race is does not matter, she replied, still frustratingly calm. You can reach the peak of your biotic skill with training. What I have to teach can give you that and make you last longer in a fight. I don't need it. She had learned everything she needed by herself. She didn't need anyone to teach her. You got shot in the ass, Gurus reminded her. I'd say you need it. Did I ask you? She shot at him with a snarl. She'll take it, Naruto declared to Samara. Cue the outrage in 3, 2, 1. Kurama counted down, rapping his claws against the floor. He made it sound like he was talking about an idle thing, but he knew all the same what was coming. And he wasn't wrong either. What? Snapped Ruko as she spun her head and glared at him. It's not going to hurt you, Ruko. Besides, no one can have too much training. His leg thrummed when he said those words. How many times did he hear those words from Jiraiya and applied them himself? He and his body had lost count. This is my decision. And you are under my command. I got a feeling that you would refuse just out of spite. I won't let that happen. To Samara, he said, welcome aboard. If you want to give some of the crew lessons, let them know. She nodded her head. I will do that. But my concern is with her. All right then, he said, walking past her. Come on, people. We have places to be, people to hunt, and lessons to learn. He called back to the others. I'm going to kill you, Ruko told him as she hurried up to his side, her boots making a quick hard thumping sound each time she stomped on the floor. I've heard that a lot from a lot of people who actually meant it, Ruko. I'm still here, he said without looking back at her. I do mean it. Of course you do, he replied with the utmost sincere sarcasm he had. It was enough to make her start cursing him with every kind of foul thing that could come to her mind. Gurus and Samara stayed silent as they followed, although the Turian had a more surprised look than the Asari as they listened. Whoa, who knew she had a mouth like that on her? Chome asked in equal parts surprised and impressed. Considering who she comes from, do you really have to ask that question? Sun asked the Nanabai. I'd rather not consider that, Kurama said. I know where she comes from and I know where his tongue has been. We all know where his tongue has been. We've seen where it's been. Not as well as I do. If he didn't know that to be the truth, the blonde shinobi might have been offended by that statement. But unfortunately, he did know that it was the truth, and it was best left at that. This thing is way too fucking small, Shikaka declared in a nervous voice that was beginning to verge on panic. Isabu, on the other hand, was completely content. It is perfectly fine, you're just overreacting. Now stop being such a whiny tanuki. Naruto rolled his eyes at them both, even though he agreed with the Sanbai. It had taken a week for the Normandy to reach the planet Liara had directed them to. Once there, they landed at the closest spaceport and requested a submarine. The idea was to try and find the tribe base in the guise of a supply drop. Now they were almost there. He was sitting on a bench against the hull. He had a clear view of the pilot's cockpit but chose not to look that way. Personally, he found a Hanner driving a little weird to watch. He did one last check of his equipment, making sure that he had the guns, the kunai, and the shuriken. He chose to leave the churka ammo behind this time around. Given that they were going to be tight quarters underwater, it was best not to take chances. What are you doing? Grunt asked from where he sat opposite. The Krogan was sitting in the awkward positioning he had seen. But that was because of the size of the sub and the size of him. He was forced to bow his head and arch his back just to match the curve. I'm checking my weapons, Grunt. Why? The better question is why not? It never hurts to make sure you have everything you need. He held a few kunai in hand to check them. He saw that they were in order and put them away, leaving one out. He checked the balance and the weight by flipping it through the air, catching it with the other hand. You should do the same. If I could, I might, he grumbled irritably. Good point, the blonde conceded. They were barely able to get him and his gun into the sub in the first place. Can concur with Commander, checking equipment always needed, Morden said from where he sat beside Ruko, who sat next to Grunt and was apparently content with glaring at her brother. He had noticed the look ever since they touched down and below the ocean's surface. But now he decided to speak on it. Got something on your mind? I'm going to kill you, she said simply. He wasn't impressed. You said that on Ilium? I meant it on Ilium. I doubt it. He could not hear the venom he usually heard when it came to that kind of statement. You should check your gear. My gear is fine, she snapped at him, still glaring at her. Okay. He wasn't going to fight her on it. He rested his head against the hull, letting his ears hear the sound of the ocean humming behind it. It was a pleasant sound, one that allowed him to relax for a little while longer. Nice to see someone agreeing with me on the sound, Isaba said, pleased with the fact. Hey, I like water too, Saiken said in protest. You like ponds? So? There's a difference between a pond and an ocean. Don't remind me of that. Please don't remind, Shikaka begged him. If the Tanuki could sweat, he probably would. Instead, all he did was shift sand a lot. The Sanbai just rolled his eye. Get over it already. I can't. We're surrounded by water, lots and lots of water. There's no way out. We're not going to make it out alive. It's all around us. I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Oh great, he's having a panic attack, Sun said, making it sound like it was nothing special. In fact, the ape sounded rather bored. We noticed, Matatabi said, just as bored. Someone want to take care of it? Chome asked the other 7. I got it, Kurama told them all, moving over to the panicking Tanuki and knocking him out with one punch. There. Problem solved. You enjoy that too much, Gyuki chastised him as he walked away from the unconscious Tanuki. So, why is Shikaka freaking out about the water? Naruto couldn't help but ask. He had seen the Tanuki at his most psychotic, sarcastic, and punching dummy. Admittedly, he was responsible for more than a few of that last one, but he had never seen him freaking it out like that. He's used to live in a desert, the fox answered. So? There's water in a desert. Sunigakure had been built over a giant underground lake which helped keep it alive all those years. There are oases in deserts. This is an ocean. Figure it out, Kurama told him as he sat down and relaxed. Too much of a good thing? he asked, waiting for an answer. Close enough for me. Your pardon, the Hanner pilot said to them in his echoing voice. This one is coming into contact with the base. Perhaps now would be the best time for the humans to hide? Yeah, okay, the blonde told him, standing up. Ruko did the same and together, they walked to the back. Since the idea was to do a supply run and they were going to a tribe base, the humans on the team couldn't be found until they were in. They had spent an entire night on the way to the planet hashing out ideas before Naruto had suggested a tried and true method, crates. While Miranda had scoffed at the idea, he pointed out that they didn't have any better ideas. She said that it was stupid and he just responded with one of Jiraiya's favorite sayings, which he had learned from Kakashi first, ironically enough. The crates that were going to hold them were mixed in with the other crates that held actual supplies. They were slightly bigger than the rest, but it wouldn't be obvious at first sight, and that was what they were betting on. But it still meant things were going to be slightly cramped for the blondes. It was annoying, but they had to get onto that base, which meant taking whatever way in possible. Naruto looked at his own crate, all hard plastic and steel edges. The lid was open and had a handle on the inside so he could open or close it by himself. This probably is going to feel like Grunt is feeling right now, he thought to himself as he stepped in. He stood there for a moment, watching Ruko getting her own crate. She felt his eyes and turned to face him. What? She asked. Nothing, just making sure you're going to stay. When have I ever run from a fight? He couldn't help but smile at that. Are we counting the times on the Normandy or not? She clenched her teeth and turned it into a snarl. That happened once and I was caught by surprise. Even though she was snarling at him, she still looked embarrassed by what had happened to her. It was only your second lesson with Samara. It couldn't have been that bad. Stop talking. He didn't. I mean, what possible reason could you have for running up the deck screaming like a little girl before hiding in my room? I said stop talking. She reached for the handle and closed her crate firmly. Must you torment her like that? Matatabi chastised her Jinchuriki. I wouldn't be a brother if I didn't, he replied quietly as he lowered himself into the crate. That's not any kind of brotherly love I know of. Cut me some slack, we're still figuring it out. He settled into the crate in the most comfortable way he could manage, which ended up with him curled up halfway into a ball and facing the bottom. It might have been easy to get into that position, but getting out of it was going to be annoying. It's still kinda weird. That, and you don't exactly have the best examples of sibling love to go on, Kurama remarked. Yeah, that too, he agreed, thinking of Itachi and Sasuke. If he tried following what their relationship had been like, he would have been trying to make Ruko kill him. She is trying to kill you, Chome reminded him. I distinctly remember her saying that. She didn't mean it. Trust me, I would have known if she had meant it. If she had meant it, she wouldn't be on this mission. In fact, she would still be on the Normandy under close watch until the two of them could have a talk. Wasn't there also Hinata and Hanabi? Gyuki suggested. That's an example you could have gone on with. Yeah, maybe, he agreed somewhat. Thinking about Hinata made his heart pang and his sense of self kick him for being such an idiot about that whole situation. Kami, he was truly an idiot back when he was young. If he hadn't been so focused on his work and took the time to recognize what had been going on, the awkwardness probably would have been so thick. He probably would have made a choice and things could have been better. Still hitting yourself with that, HM? Kurama asked rhetorically and with amusement. Yes. Okay. But you're making a mistake in your recollection. What's that? That you used to be an idiot. Kurama! Snapped Matatabi. That was uncalled for, Koko chastised the fox. I don't feel so good, Shikaka moaned. You can hardly say that I'm wrong. He's had his moments of stupidity since he woke up, the Kyuubi said in his defense. He was completely relaxed, even looking about he was going to take a nap with his head resting on his hands. He's not wrong. Through the crate, he felt the submarine shudder and then stop. Considering that was probably the sub reaching the base, you might not want to talk out loud now, Isabu cautioned him. Yeah, I figured that out, he said to the turtle silently. And the fur ball isn't wrong. I've had my moments. But I was especially stupid when it came to those damn love triangles. Well, yes, that's true, Kurama said conversationally, especially when they tried to get your attention on them, and you pretended to be ignorant. I was ignorant. He had been so consumed on finishing on that seal and ending the war, everything just seemed to take second place in importance. Until Sasuke and Kiba forced you to realize what was going on. After that, you pretended to be ignorant for all you could. It was very sad to watch. The fox didn't shout at him, but there was an angry tone of disappointment to his voice. But the blonde had heard that tone many times before. You know what was going on, Kurama. That took precedent. You still could have made time for it. I know. You know that now after I bludgeoned it to death right in front of you. The fox paused like he was going to end the conversation there, but then continued on. The closest you ever came to making that decision is that one time when Sakura took you out of the house. Yeah, I remember that. How could he forget that? It had only been a few days before he and B had gotten ambushed. Flashback. Gaki, someone's at the door, the fox remarked idly. I heard, Naruto replied, keeping his focus on the seal work in front of him instead of the knocking. He had converted a part of his room into a studio, but the desk was surrounded by waste bins and they were full. The knocking didn't leave. I'm busy. Come back later. Then it turned into a fist slamming against the door. I think they want to come in. I said I'm busy. The door opened with a loud crash. Naruto. Oh look, it's your teammate. He sighed and turned around to face Sakura. She stood at the edge to his room, looking over all of it. Behind her against the wall were the shattered halves of his door. You're paying for a new door, he said right away. For the love of Kami, Naruto, she said to him, how long has it been since you came out of this apartment? Her hands were on her hips and she looked quite annoyed. He shrugged. I don't know, couple of days. Try a week. If you knew the answer, why did you bother asking? That's beside the point. Look at this place. It's a mess. She gestured sharply down at the littered ground, sending a couple of the crumpled up paper floating in the air. Don't you ever clean up after yourself? Of course I do, he protested, making it sound like her words were a personal affront to him. Looking at this, I doubt it. And look at yourself. He did look at himself. His clothes were moderately fine and there weren't any food stains on them. That's because you last ate yesterday morning, the fox told him. Really? He asked in surprise. Yes, really. I thought I ate last night. No. You just fell asleep in your chair. Naruto! Shouted Sakura, right in his face. He jerked back from her and fell down to the ground. Ow! What the hell, Sakura? He demanded as he stood back up, rubbing his injured head. That hurt. Oh please, you've been through worse, the fox said. I'm trying to talk to you and you wander off into your imagination, she told him. How else was I going to get your attention, huh? She had a point there. Well, at least you didn't punch me. That would have hurt more. He reached down and picked up his chair. Once it was set right, he made to sit back down in it, only to have Sakura's arm bar his way. He looked over at her. She had a determined look on her face. No. No more work for you, she declared. It's time you got out of this apartment. Not this again, he thought with an inward groan. The others would always try to drag him out of here when it wasn't time to go on a mission. Sakura, I have to work on this, he told her, reaching for the chair again. That's been your excuse ever since you shut yourself in this apartment, she retorted. You won't even tell us what it is you're working on. I keep telling you guys it's top secret stuff, she finished for him with a small hint of mockery. The mockery left, and concern took over. You know, you have your friend to help you with this. We've been studying seals and I know we can give you some advice on what you're doing. He would love nothing else to have his friends help with this. But if they discovered what he was working on, they would immediately try to stop him from finishing. Not ever the Kages knew what he was doing because he was certain that they would try to do the same thing. But there was no other way. He had tried to find one but couldn't. If he got this seal to work, it would end the war, which was everyone wanted. Sakura, take that arm away. I have to work on this. He tried pushing the arm and get back to the seat. But the arm stayed. No. Sakura, move the arm. No. She wasn't going to budge on this, but neither was he. So he grabbed the arm and yanked it away. She yanked back just as hard. They struggled against one another, trying to make the other back off. After a minute of silent fighting, it came down to a stare-off. That was also when he realized just how close their bodies were together. His body became quite aware of that fact, and wanted him to follow through with what might come next. He could hear the fox chuckling in the back of his head. He didn't see how this was funny. But he did know that Sakura wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman. It showed in the curves of her body and the strength of it too. He knew that she got looks as she went down the streets. But none of them had ever gotten this close to her. Her grass-green eyes watched him for something. And those lips, perfectly pink without even trying, parted by just a single inch. He could lean down and snatch a kiss from her if he wanted to. It looked like she wouldn't have protested if he had. But then she used her strength to twist his arm around his back, getting back behind him, and pushing him towards the bathroom. "Go take a shower," she told him. What? He was having a hard time coming out of the land of hormones. It sounded like she told him to take a shower. "You heard me. Go take a shower," she said again, with an amused smile on her lips. "You stink." Now he was coming out of the land of hormones easier now. "And why would I take a shower? Aside from personal hygiene?" she asked rhetorically. "You're getting out of this apartment, and you're not doing that until you are and smell clean. Now get moving." She folded her arms and took a firm stance, like she wasn't going to move from her spot. He would have argued, but that look on her face told him not. "Fine," he said in surrender, walking towards the bathroom. "Just don't peek on me." He didn't know if she had listened to him or not, but as he stepped into the shower and turned on the hot water, he found that he didn't care. The water was hot enough to turn his skin pink in seconds, and he found it to be rejuvenating. "Oh, I needed this," he said with a silent groan. "Then why didn't you get in here earlier?" Kurama asked him. "I didn't think I needed it." He rested his head against the tile wall, letting the water spray down his hair. "You just contradicted yourself." "I know." He just didn't care about it. The water was too perfect to argue about what he said. He felt like he could stay there forever. "You might want to keep the shower short, otherwise she might bust in here and demand what's taking so long," the fox told him. "On second thought, seeing where that might go would be interesting. Stay in the shower all you want." While he might have wanted it to happen, Naruto didn't want Sakura to break down another one of his doors. He finished up quickly and stepped out, ignoring the fox's annoyed sound of disappointment. He dried off quickly before leaving the bathroom and grabbing some fresh clothes. Fortunately, Sakura wasn't still in the bedroom, and he was able to dress without being called a pervert. "Sakura?" he called out once he was dressed in his usual orange pants and jacket. "You dressed?" she called back from the other side of the apartment. "Yeah," he answered. He took a quick look around his bedroom and saw that she had cleaned it up a little bit. There were no more litters of paper on the floor, and the bins were empty. He frowned in confusion. He hadn't been in the shower that long, had he? "Good. Are you in my kitchen?" he asked, taking his eyes off his clean floor. "Of course I'm in your kitchen. Why are you in my kitchen? Stripping down so she's wearing nothing but an apron?" Kurama suggested with a leery grin. "I doubt it. You know you want it to happen. Don't deny it, I can see into your mind." He knew that to be true, and he knew that image was there, in a tiny part of his mind that played to those thoughts. But it was a fantasy only. "We don't have time for that kind of thing. We're in the middle of a war." "Gaki, you make time for it." He ignored the fox and went over to the kitchen. Sakura was standing at the counter, still fully clothed, putting items in a basket. "What are you doing?" he asked her. "I'm getting you out of this apartment," she replied without looking back at him. "What's the basket for then?" When the finally item was in the basket, she took it in hand and turned to face him. "We're going on a picnic. No arguments." Strangely enough, he found himself thinking the idea just fine. "Of course you would," the fox told him. And flashback. The sound of a fist thumping against the crate shook him out of the memory, but he got the signal. He hit back once and waited. The crate opened and light shined down on his back and around his vision. "You can come out now," Grunt said from above. "Give me a moment." He tried to stand up, but the space proved to be too confined for him. "Crap. You knew this was a risk," Gyuki told him. Yeah, I know." He kept trying, but that comfortable place he put himself in proved to be what was keeping him stuck. "Grunt, I'm going to need some help." "Right," his student said. He felt the hand on the back of his cloak, and was suddenly yanked upwards out of the crate. He saw that they were all in a storage area. Grunt and Morden were standing nearby, and Ruko was getting out of her own crate. Then he realized that he was still in the air. Grunt held him like a child inspecting a new toy. The rest of the team was staring at the two of them, waiting for the next thing to happen. But even then, It was embarrassing for the blonde. He wasn't some kind of doll. Put me down. His student released him, and he landed standing in the crate. He climbed out, and the first thing he noticed was Ruko grinning deviously at him. He knew it was a devious grin because she was using his devious grin. Not a word, he told her. Yeah, right, she said back. Like hey, mission, remember? That closed her mouth right away. He turned his attention over to Gurus and Mordin. So, we got an okay? The Turian of the two nodded in acknowledgement. Yeah, they thought we were a supply run, just as planned. Security impressive, Mordin commented, his eyes watching the door. Cameras practically everywhere. We'll have to be careful when moving about. Any chance we can rig them? Naruto asked him. He thought it over quickly. Doubtful. Control area would be deep in base. Chances of getting there undetected, virtually impossible. Also makes finding target hard. What are you thinking, Naruto? Matatabi asked him. That we go with the usual plan. Oh no, the fox groaned. Shut it, furball, he retorted instantly. All right, he said to his team. There's nothing we can do about the cameras for now. We're just going to have to play it by ear and wing it. I love that kind, Ruko said with a feral grin. She's definitely your sister, Sun said with a roll of his eyes. The other Biju nodded in agreement. Shikaku was still unconscious. We've already established that, thank you. But he eyed her all the same. We're going to have to be silent for now, Ruko. So if your gun has a silencer, I suggest you use it. He looked at everyone else. The same goes for all. If you don't have one, don't use the weapon. Mordin didn't hesitate, swapping out his shotgun for a heavy pistol and attaching a silencer to it. Gurus did the same with his sniper rifle. Ruko frowned, but when Gurus tossed her an extra silencer, she lit up. Thanks, she told him. It never helps to have two, he replied simply. What about me? Grunt said unhappily. The only weapon he was packing was the machine gun, and there was no way he could put a silencer on it. Time for another lesson, his sensei told him, reaching into his pocket and tossing a spool at him. He caught it and looked at it. His face became very confused. Wire? He asked. Shinobi wire, the blonde replied. You're going to kill with that. How? He asked, still confused but understanding it somewhat. You slip it around their necks and pull it until they are dead. It was a standard tactic for Shinobi when it came to assassinations, and he had been shown how to do it. Tactic might not be as effective as thought, Mordin spoke. Turian, Asari, and Solarian neck different from human. Might cause trouble. Maybe not, he replied. I was told it's all about the strength you've got. He thumped Grunt's arm once. He's got more than enough. But Grunt's look of confusion had disappeared into a frown. This is not the right way to kill someone. His body and instincts were telling him that there was only one way to fight and kill, facing your enemy from the front and with weapon in hand, or better yet with only your fists. Using this weapon to kill from the shadows was cowardly and weak. Naruto looked up at him. This might become a problem, Isaba said. You should do something about it, Chomei told the blonde. I know, I'm on it, he told them both. He didn't need their input on everything little thing, especially when said thing was obvious. It got to be a little grating. Grunt, there is no right way to kill someone, he told the Krogan. If we face the tribe in open combat here, it's not going to end well for us. You know that. He did. Really, he did. This still doesn't feel right, he said back, holding the spool like he was 2 seconds away from crushing it in his grip. Then think of this as another lesson, getting rid of that kind of notion. Now you're going to use that spool of wire and only that spool of wire. Got it? He nodded grumpily. Yeah, I got it. Good. He activated the helmet and pulled the hood up over his head before palming a kunai into his hand. Time to play the game. The door opened and the corridor beyond was empty. They stepped cautiously but also quickly. Now wasn't the time to muck around. They had discussed the plan beforehand. They didn't know the exact layout of the base, but they were going on the assumption that it was pretty much the same as the other bases. They would first check the lab, which would be at the center or back of the base. If they were using the same logic for where they had been put, it was only a few corridor lengths from the storage area to the lab. But those few corridors were going to be riddled with the possibility of camera and guards. They were going to have to be careful. So far, they didn't have any problems. That quickly changed when Naruto came to a stop. Inbound, he said quietly, keeping his back pressed against the corridor wall and only peeking out the side. How many? Asked Morden. Just one, in a seri, he replied, pulling his head back and looking at his student. You're up. Grunt moved past him to stand at the corner, the wire wrapped tight in his hands. The Asari seemed to walk slowly towards him, and he began to grow impatient. I should get out there and attack her, he thought to himself. It would be the right thing to do. A firm hand found itself on his arm. Wait, his sensei told him quietly. How did? He stopped himself from fully asking that question. When it came to his sensei, it was a little bit pointless to ask that kind of question. It seemed like he knew what he was thinking and stopped him before he did it. But he did as he was told and waited. The Asari got closer and closer. He waited. She was getting louder. He waited. The sounds of her feet were beginning to sound like drums pounding away to him and his ears. He waited. The drums were getting louder and louder, hammering their way through his ears and into his brain, until he could hear nothing else. He started to get nervous, wondering if he would be able to do this. His inner self was screaming at him to fuck the wire and get out there to take her head. It was baying for blood and it was very tempting to just obey it. But he didn't. He waited. It was only when the sounds of her footsteps were right on top of him, and he could see her shadow falling over them, that the hand fell from his arm. Now, his sensei whispered. He lunged out of the corner, wrapped the wire around the Asari's neck, and pulled her back into the corridor. Her voice was trying to come out, possibly to try and call for help. But what emerged from her throat were just strangled gasps. When he pulled harder on the wire, the gasps died away. So did her desperate energy that fueled her hands to try and dig the wire out of her neck. Her eyes became glassy, and he knew that she was died. He released the wire and the corpse fell to the ground. Good job, Naruto told him. That is what you need to keep doing, okay? Okay, he replied shortly. There wasn't anything else to say. He used that method 3 more times as they made their way to the lab. Each time his inner Krogan roared for blood, but his training was telling him to ignore it and do as his sensei had ordered. Each time, he found it easier to listen to his training than to his inner Krogan. The journey to the lab took longer than on the other bases because they were trying to avoid the cameras. And so far, since they had to silently kill only 4 tribe guards, they would have to say they were doing just fine. Their knowledge of previous tribe bases was how they moved with a purpose instead of wandering around like they hadn't a clue. When they finally found the lab, they took a moment to check the rest of the corridor. There was no one else out there, so they approached the door with ease. It opened and the lab was revealed to be empty. Son of a bitch, Ruko swore as she took in the empty room with its tables, equipment, computers, and screens full of data. That didn't matter to her. What mattered was the fact that they had snuck through the base, avoiding and killing everything that might have given them away, but there was no one to show for their work. Morden, Gurus, find any data you think is relative, Naruto ordered, not letting his disappointment of not finding their target get in the way. Ruko, Grunt, get back into the corridor and keep an eye out. Stay on the calm. If we see an enemy, what do we do? Grunt asked him. Only kill them if they are alone and they're about to discover you. Otherwise, observe only. They left the lab, leaving him with the Turian and the Solarian, who were both already hacking through the computers and the screens. All he could do was wait for them to be done. He walked off to the side, holstering the kunai he had in hand. You know, you should take up some studying again, Saiken told him. Why? He asked. That way, you're not just standing around like a dumb idiot waiting for someone to feed you the answers. You should do what he says, Kurama told the blonde. Yeah, I'll get right on that, he replied with a small bite of sarcasm. There was a bit much on his plate right now to worry about trying to understand modern science and computers. You should. You'll have to make time for it, but you should, Isaba said. Commander, I've got something, Gurus told him. As do I, Morden said. Both started to make their way over to him. He walked away from the side and met them halfway. All right, what did you find? He asked. Fuck. Ruko suddenly shouted into the calm. Ruko? He asked instantly. We've got trouble. There were a couple of bursts of gunfire to accent her words. Ruko, I said no shooting. They were trying to be silent here, Cammy take it. Opening fire makes the whole point moot. I fucking have to. There are more of them than there are me. He stopped his grousing about staying silent and paid more attention to what she was saying. How many are there? I don't know. I didn't get a good count before they started shooting at me. 8 at the least, maybe, she guessed. I think that they were looking for us. This is not a normal patrol. Grunt, go assist, he ordered his student. With a spool of wire? Asked the Krogan with a hint of disbelief in his voice. Kid, I could give you a 3-hour lecture complete with tests on how using a wire will get you through a battle, he thought with a knee-jerk reaction, having listened to said lecture from Enko, Irika, and Kakashi all at the same time, while being wrapped in said wire to prevent him from running. But instead, he said, no point in being silent when they've probably discovered us already. Weapons free. You got it, he said with a grin so bloodthirsty the blonde could see it. He turned his attention back to Gurus and Morden. Did you guys get everything that you could? Yeah, Gurus replied. Of course, Morden answered with a quick nod of head. Alright, one question, is Urzia still on planet? Before either of them could answer, they heard a loud roaring sound come from outside the lab. That was followed by the sound of something slamming down to the ground hard, and the base's alarm started to wail off. The entire cacophony of noise was enough to make a headache seem tame. But the blonde ignored it and focused on a question. What was that? It wasn't my fault, Ruko said after a moment's hesitation, sounding very embarrassed. That just made his suspicions worse. What was that? Well, a bullet might have been coming at me and I might have used my biotics to deflect it, which might have hit the wall at triple the speed and power, which might have caused the wall to spring a really big hole where water might be coming in a fast pace. He took a moment to let that information settle into his mind. It lasted only a heartbeat, but to some it felt much longer. Are you saying that you just caused the base to start flooding? It wasn't my fault, she repeated more insistently. We're gonna die, Shikaku screamed unhelpfully. Codex Entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance, the 6 Saints of the Empire. The central religion of the frontier focuses on these 6 persons. While one half of the group is mythical, the second half has been recorded as living humans at one time. They are separated as such by their separate titles, the 3 heavenly saints and the 3 earthly saints. Despite being worshipped with a degree given to gods of other religions, it had been stated time and time again that they are not gods. The 3 heavenly saints were initially 2, the miner and the smith. As the process for creating steel was discovered and put into use, an additional saint, the forger, was added. The best description for the saints is found in one half of a popular saying. The miner found the ore, the smith made the iron, and the forger crafted the steel. As such, each saint is worshipped by the men of their own profession. There has been some speculation that the heavenly saints are only the first miner, smith, and forger in the frontier raised to a higher standard via worship and storytelling, but it is not a commonly held belief. The earthly saints, on the other hand, are a prime example of that idea, and it because of what came to be because of them. See steam power. The first earthly saint is James Harrison, an architect who designed the first frontier aqueduct, which led to Iron Helm, one of the empires, then known as the Iron Kingdom, major cities, to prosper. His design soon spread to the rest of the land as a mean of bringing clean water closer. Matthew Adams is the second earthly saint, having created the first boiler. His apprentice Thomas Richardson discovered the method of channeling the steam given off by the boiler into a source of power, thus becoming the third earthly saint. The 3 of them make up the second half of the popular saying. Harrison carried the river, Adams heated the water, and Richardson channeled the steam. In spite of being worshipped, there is a decidedly lack of any official religious details. There is no church, no priests, sacred rites, or documents that prove that the religion exists. That is done by general knowledge and word of mouth. When questioned about this curious fact, it was revealed that this was done purpose as to avoid zealotism and fanaticism. The Iron King summed up the explanation by quoting Thomas Richardson after being worshipped as a saint, "The only thing worse than a nut is a religious nut." They always have an excuse.